Hey yo, how's everyone doing today? This is Trusty 8 Podcast for October 5th, 2022. Um, Inviting people in. I'm going to open up the room soon. We'll pin that. Oh, it's not going to let me pin it here. I got to go to YouTube. So I'll do that in a second. I'm going to put on this video. We're going to finish the Answers in Genesis video that I got too frustrated with yesterday to finish over on Patreon. If you're not subscribed, please think about going to subscribe on Patreon. I'm going to open up a $1 tier coming soon. And kind of expanding on the content I'm doing over there in the Stupid Monkey Philosophy channel. Stupid Monkey. Yeah. Jump right back into this extremely frustrating AIG video and be with you in just a moment.
Trying to map out the genome of Neanderthal, which, like they said, there's a lot of information we see there in the modern day humans. They would say modern day humans today, but we're all just one human race.
Yeah, sorry, cut you off.
No, that's fine, yeah.
Just so the audience knows, when we're talking about Neanderthals are people. They're not missing links. They're not cavemen, if you will. Some halfway between an ape and a human. They're fully human. All the features of Neanderthal within the human population today, even the ridge brow. I've known some people with some pretty serious ridge brows. They won't let me take pictures. I'm like, come on, let me take some pictures. But no, they're human beings made in the image of God. They live post flood, and as they were going to various parts of the world, we see some evidence of their bodies, in burial form. Sometimes they weren't clothes, built flutes. They were clearly humans.
Yep. And that leads us into this next one, which has a similar theme. Whale evolution isn't completely understood, but genes reveal part of the story. So from the evolutionary perspective, these land animals evolved, and then as noted in the article, they did an about face. They came out of the sea, evolved onto the land, did that about face, and then evolved back into the water. So they're switching from an aquatic to a terrestrial and then back to an aquatic lifestyle. And the supposed ancestor, based on the genetic analysis that evolutionists do to try and understand these branching tree diagrams called cladograms, says that it was some relationship to cows and pigs and camels that we have today, went back into the water and developed all of these things. We hear about creatures like Pakicetus, which was a supposed walking whale that was found in Pakistan, and other things. So all of these cetaceans, these whales, were actually once land animals, and they turned back around. And the evidence was just overwhelming from all this.
Yeah, I think that's a gross oversimplification there. I'm sorry, I apologize. I'm still waiting for my page to load here to see if I can pin this link. Maybe I'll just repost it somewhere. But as I mentioned on my Patreon channel, Forrest Valkai has a great series that he's just started releasing, and he's addressing exactly this, the evolution of whales and several other things. A great series on biology and evolution everyone should check out.
This genetic information that they laid out.
That sounds like a whale of a tale.
It was.
The whole article talks about they lost this.
Yeah.
They just, all these, what we say is just mutations in the genetic code, basically, is all it is. But they're just claiming, they're just completely, they're in the water now, so they didn't need to salivate anymore. So they just lost the gene for making saliva.
Now, whales are mammals,
Yes.
so we would expect them to have some genetic similarity to
Yes.
other mammals, because God, when he designed mammals or sea
That's how we
mammals, they're going
developed
to
the
have
idea of a
certain features.
mammal, is we looked at those characteristics.
particular
and grouped them
characteristics.
together.
Right. So it just frustrates me, because when we start with the Bible, God made the whales before he made any land animals. They were actually made on day 5,
Day
flying
5,
sea
yeah.
creatures. You see, when you start with the wrong worldview, you get the wrong interpretation. And so I wrote a story all over this, imaginary time. They have 400 million years, 350 million years, 10 million years. That's all imaginary time. It's not real. God created everything in 6 days. He rested on the 7th. That's not a problem for an all-powerful God. And
And sadly, even within the young Earth community, young Earth creationist, biblical creationist community, there are people who are proposing those types of ideas that some land animal developed into a whale-like creature after the flood. And so we're dealing with those types of issues, even within our own community, trying to understand that evidence and sort of.
Yeah, that's demonstrating a huge issue within the community of believers, right? We know it's there. I'm still struggling to get this link up. Apparently, I didn't make myself a admin from my other YouTube channel, so that's interesting. That's funny. I think that's how we did it there. All right. Hopefully that thing worked. Yeah, I got extremely frustrated with this video on Patreon yesterday. I've been doing these every week to my own chagrin. So let's just keep it up, and hopefully we'll have some more fun stuff coming up. I've got a few other videos in my watch later that I think will be much easier for us to digest, but I just felt I had to finish what I started here, so continue with this.
Sort all those pieces out.
Now, no one has ever observed this happen. No one's ever repeated it.
Nope, it's based on genetic analysis of all of these things and fossil analysis, but we don't have any genetic traits of those ancient creatures that supposedly developed in this branching structure. All we have are the modern day creatures. So they have to assume those relationships to get to the conclusions that they do. Another piece
And
of
a lot of that
argument.
modeling that they use is something they've created themselves. So they've already put their assumptions into it. So when they measure things, they're already finding those connections that really only exist because they put them there in the first
Yeah.
place.
I'll just jump on and say hello. I'm trying to make sure my connection speed doesn't slow down too much while I'm broadcasting this. So I'm trying to stay off camera, but doing well today. It was like a toss up between doing this or going out on my boat again, and I decided probably be more productive to do this right now. I went out and got some early dinner and a new book that I'm going to be reading. So lots of philosophy literature going on here and over at Stupid Monkey Philosophy, and yeah, just trying to get back in the swing of things. I hope you all are doing well. Do this. You can see my pretty face. I'll mute this, and we'll do some live reactions.
Well, you said something earlier, Dr. Rivera, about, they have these genes that have been lost. Now, that's interesting to me because they're assuming that they're lost,
Right.
that they were there in the first place. We have an article on our website.
Yeah, well, they're not lost. I mean, genes that we selectively did away with were made dormant, right? Like we still have those alleles, right? They're just not active, I think is more the way it works. But let's continue. Hey, Maya, great to see you. See Maya Agason in the chat. Lovely.
Cycle missing or misinterpreted, and it's an excellent article because in the world's perspective, they're thinking, oh, well, they had to have these genes and now they've lost them, so when we don't see them, they must have lost them. Or the other answer is they weren't there in the first place.
Or
It's
they
got to
were,
design with
there's
those
some type of
genes.
control mechanism.
Right. Well, they're wrong here, right? They are there. They're still present. They're just inactive, right? They're completely misunderstanding this whole point, I think, in genetics.
You've got another book over there, Bodie, by Dr. John Sanford, that deals with that issue a little bit higher level, dealing with genetic entropy. Entropy basically means decay.
Yeah, so this is John Sanford. He's a geneticist, a brilliant guy, actually. He was involved in the gene gun many years ago. A lot of that initial research doing some of that. That was amazing, some of the stuff he's done. But he wrote this book, Genetic Entropy. If you want to understand genetics, that's a great book to dive into. I'm going to be honest, it's a little bit higher level.
Yeah.
Entropy is just like one facet of genetics and the study of it. Like entropy is one thing. So you can't understand the whole of genetics by understanding entropy. That's not how it works.
So your 11-year-olds probably don't want to read it, but it really is amazing to help you understand mutations and natural selection and how the genome works. It really is a good book looking at it from a biblical viewpoint. So that's pretty powerful.
All right, our next article then comes to us
from a biblical viewpoint. They always throw that one in there. If you want to understand this from a biblical viewpoint, that doesn't mean there's anything scientific about it, right? This is just how we try to reconcile these facts with the teachings in the Bible. Good job.
From Not the Bee, and the title is Christians Come Read This Mega Thread from Allie Beth Stuckey. Was posted on Twitter about how the only way to defeat the radical left is through Christianity. So the point of her little thread, and as she goes through and outlines various things, is that neoconservatism, this resurgence of conservative values in America, is being led by a lot of people who don't have a biblical foundation for those things. And we see lots of good things being said by them. They're trying to fight critical race theory, and they're trying to fight some of the marriage issues and family issues, the decay that we see there, but they're not grounding it in biblical truths. And she goes through and lays out point by point. We'd encourage you to go read through this tweet thread or read them here in in this article, and she shows how we've really got to ground all these things in some ultimate truth, and that ultimate truth is only found in the Bible, in the triune God, and specifically in Jesus Christ himself.
Sorry, everybody, wrong button. I feel like I've heard of this person before. Is this The Raging Atheist has covered Mary Beth, I believe, her YouTube channel. If anybody remembers, I can't remember the name of the channel, but post in chat. I'm going to try and go and reopen my YouTube here and see if it will work for me now. I think wrenches have been given on this channel. I just didn't give them to myself on my other channel, so that's unfortunate. I'll try to repost the StreamYard link again. Okay, and then I'll hit play and be back in a minute.
Yeah, it looks like she had about 15 to 20 tweets in here to really get
It
this
was a
going.
good thread, yeah.
So it was, I actually enjoyed reading it. I
It was
loved it.
excellent,
Yeah. I mean, she laid it right out there. Like, morality comes from the Bible. And there's a lot of people who want secular morality. They love the morality from the Bible. They just don't want what God has to offer. They don't want Jesus. They don't want the Lord. They just want to have that morality, and they think that it can exist all on its own. But it really can't. They don't have a foundation, they don't have a basis for that morality. So they're actually borrowing from the Bible, but they don't want to give credit to the Bible for that many instances.
And I like how she did, she kind of addressed the issue of what we say neutrality is that a lot of these organizations are trying to get to that neutral ground. As
Neutral.
There is no neutral ground, right? You're either for or against God. The Bible is clear about that.
And
there
she pointed that out,
and that's what I liked about that. She really hit that, she said, there is no neutral ground. You either have to choose, who you're going to follow. What is your worldview?
There are platforms today like the Daily Wire, a popular neoconservative website, who have strong Christians writing for them, but there are also others who are just Jewish or secular or other things. And they pose a conservatism that really isn't as high of a standard as they think it is. For example, there's a razor company launched by the founder of the Daily Wire, and in his initial launch commercial, he includes 2 half-naked women with their shirts open the whole time. Tell me that's conservative. It's not. And they want to pose as that. They're also trying to develop a kids platform so that you can be safe online and let your kids view these things. But they also promote things like homosexuality in some of their writers and speakers. And so how can we trust those things with our
we need a
kids?
safe streaming platform.
Hey, I'm glad you said that.
Wait a minute.
Oh, is it one?
Say if nothing else, the speakers at Answers in Genesis are consistent on these points. They are consistently homophobic. They are consistently transphobic. They are consistently apologetic of the God of the Old Testament. That much is true. And it kind of just gets worse the lower you go on this totem. Which I think is interesting. All of their speakers and apparently their audience members, I don't know. The panels they have on here seem to, like, there's never any or at least not much contention between them. They all seem to be in agreement on the topics of the day. I've noticed that.
We happen to have one, of course. We
Yes,
have
we do.
Answers.tv. How many people here in our audience have Answers.tv already? Yeah, we got a few of you
All right,
already.
the rest of you need to repent. Just kidding. So we find a great programming on there. We've got a kids program called Shoes Off and Hike and Seek.
Animal programs,
Animal
and
programs at the
science
zoo.
experimentation
Unlocking science with Mr.
programs with
P.
Mr. P.
That's right.
Lots of great resources.
If you want to binge watch Ken Ham, you're welcome to do
Yeah.
that.
Answers
But-
News.
Yeah.
Answers News is on
Yes.
there. Absolutely. So great platform for you to check out and receive lots of great content that you can really trust is going to be from a biblical perspective.
Right.
Now, Ali Beth Stuckey is actually going to be one of the
Yes.
speakers at the Answers for Women conference March of 2023, which is sold out. But you can stream that conference to your church or ladies group if you want to. There's information about that on our website.
Yeah.
But we highly encourage you to do that because she is one of the speakers, and we're really excited to have her come. It's going to be an awesome conference.
Yeah, check out answersforwomen.org to find
Yeah.
more details about that.
Yeah,
Okay, so now I remember a little better. There's sisters actually that do these streams, and then they were doing advice for like young newlywed women. I think was kind of their platform. I still can't really recall, but these it's very familiar to me now. So apparently they're going to be appearing at this AIG conference. I think it's interesting. They are diversifying. Now they have this AIG Canada, AIG or Answers for Women thing going on. Well, Sandy, I appreciate you coming by. This is kind of unfinished business, so once I'm done with this, we'll be moving on to something hopefully a little more positive for us. But I felt that I really should finish this up. Again, started it over on Patreon yesterday, and was just gritting my teeth as well. So we got through the whole anti-abortion part, and so now we're on to this. But there's a clear theme throughout these shows. I think the positions of the women on these shows are often very interesting because they are more hardline, more fundamentalist than even a lot of the men. And I don't think it's an accident that they choose women who will take these positions to co-host these programs. I don't think they'd have it any other way at Answers in Genesis.
When I read through this, I was actually really excited about it because a lot of times I read through stuff and people get it, a good 90% right, But I was reading through and I'm like, wow,
It's
she
good,
nailed it.
and it was
And
concise,
my
right?
next-
It was just, it's really good.
My next thought was, oh, they should say this. And then I'd read it. Oh, she said that. Good on her. So I was getting really excited about it.
I was like, I wish I had written that.
Yeah,
It
but
was so good.
she pointed out the no neutrality, which is that's a big. A lot of Christians think we can just be neutral. We can meet the unbeliever on neutral ground, but that's not really the case. It's borrowed ground. Just like you said, Christ said, "You're either for me or you're against me. You either gather or you scatter." And I love the way she put that in here. But even other little concepts in here, like rights. Do you realize rights are a Christian concept? If you throw the Bible out, what basis do you have for rights? You see, those actually come out of a biblical worldview. Freedom comes out of a biblical worldview. So often people borrow those. They want to use those, but they don't realize where they come from, where the source is. And it actually comes from a biblical worldview.
Absolutely. All right, moving on to our next article. Plants evolved even earlier than we thought, exquisite 3D fossil suggests. So here they found.
Okay, I finally got something done over there on the stream. Sandy, you should have a wrench. And there should be a link to the stream for the StreamYard pinned at the top now. Got those two things accomplished. Right. And these ones I find humorous. When these folks try to read like popular science magazines, I'm really getting a kick out of this, and they don't really read into the meat of the article. And there's only like 2 more segments left in this AIG video. I've got it playing at 1.5 speed, so hopefully we'll get it through it pretty quickly. But I'll let this one run and see if you guys can find out where they're getting it just horribly wrong.
Found these very small fossils, about 0.5 millimeter in diameter, and they are a type of algae that we find today called codium, but it's also a little bit smaller than the ones we see today, but they're virtually identical to what we find. So they found these in the fossil layers. I love microscopy and playing with microscopes, except the software is giving me fits right now I'm dealing with. But getting to examine these things is amazing. And they looked at these and they found them to be just like they are today, almost like there was no change over this supposed 540 million year period that we see these fossils in and the ones we have today.
Yeah, one of the things that I like about this is the way they're doing 3D modeling of this, to be able to see it in 3 dimensions. That's pretty
I
amazing.
was like, that part is like observational
Yes.
science, and I think that is really fascinating.
It
So we
is.
have the ability to take something that small and now
Yes.
3D image it and look at it up close
And they're doing
detail.
they're doing that with fossils and fossil layers.
Yeah.
So they're fascinated. They're totally intrigued by the science that they despise and disagree with on every level. I love it.
As well now too, so you can actually see how different fossils are actually left in situ, before they pull them out, and then they can.
What we see is
map all that.
complexity, not the simplicity that they expected. Actually alluded to that in the article. They say we expect it to be very simple, but what we're finding is extremely complex, which we shouldn't be surprised.
It's almost like it was designed to do what it's doing right from the
do
beginning
it
by
well.
an amazing God
Yeah.
who's done those things.
Well, they claim this is what.
That was nonsense. Like, just because these early algae or whatever were more complex than we expected them to be does not mean you're amazing God. Like, you just jump. Like, we're still building the tree. We're constantly putting together these pieces of this puzzle, and you all are like, nope. See, we've already got the puzzle solved. It's like, no, you've gotten no closer to proving that your answer is any better than anything we've uncovered so far. But just keep jumping to conclusions, buddy.
was what, 541 million years ago.
Ediacaran period.
When were plants created? Does anyone remember? Day 3, dry land and plants. You see, when we look at this, it's like, wow, this is an amazing fossil. But when we think biblically, wow, this makes sense. We expect this.
And then they were surprised.
I don't think so, because if you think biblically, you wouldn't expect that organism to be complex at all. I mean, it would be infinitely simpler than any other biological organism, and that's not the case, right? What you actually get is a model for the evolution of all life from this singular ancestor. So it's really interesting that you just twist the narrative that way.
Surprised that it survived 5 mass extinctions.
Yes,
And
because
still looks like algae we have today.
because the plants we think of today as flowering plants, angiosperms, they're supposed to arrive on the scene at about 135 million years ago. But actually, we find pollen. That's in the Cretaceous layers. We find pollen in the Triassic layers lower, earlier in their supposed time scale, at 243 million years. So there's 100 million years that.
I don't think a pollinator is necessarily indicative of a flowering plant. You're conflating 2 different types of organism there.
Pollen existed before the plants
Before the
evolved.
plants.
I think that creates kind of an internal conflict in their worldview.
Yeah.
Maybe all of those things were deposited during the period of a global flood or something that
Could
mixed
well
all
have been.
those
Look
things
at
together
that.
in the sediments, and we see some separating and ordering in some of those layers.
Yeah, I think a better title for this one would have been Everything You Were Ever Taught About Plant Evolution Is Not True.
Read your Bible. All right, one last article we're going to touch on real quickly here. Ultra rare diamond suggests Earth's mantle has an ocean's worth of water. Again, thinking back to the flood, we see a lot of that water that was sourced for the flood waters came from the fountains of the Great Deep. As that broke up. So we know there's water. The Bible tells us there's water underneath of the crust down in those layers of the earth. And here we see a diamond that's got some different mineral traces, ringwoodite and ferropericlase.
So I apologize. I used the wrong term there. So the pollinator would be the animal interacting with the plant, but no, flowers are not necessary to pollination, right? So that's for sure.
And enstatite and other things that seem to have been formed in a watery environment deep down in those layers of the earth. And just another confirmation of God's description of those things and how he's created things in this amazing way.
Yeah, when I see things like this, I try to think, were some of these created this way, or were they formed, say, during the flood or some of the other catastrophes?
That tectonic activity during the flood,
that's right.
place and pressure.
Yeah, I mean, we can make diamonds quickly. There's lab-made diamonds. It doesn't require millions or billions of years. We can
just
do it
don't
quickly.
buy them for that engagement ring.
But even volcanoes that go off at heat and pressure can form all sorts of gemstones quickly. We've observed that, and yet we're ingrained to believe that it takes millions and billions of years to form diamonds. But that's not necessarily the case. It can be done quickly.
Yep.
Wait, in the other scenario, you've just introduced it's just human intervention. So there's no other natural way to form diamonds, right? Unless there is intervention. But yeah, okay, sure. We'll go with that. Godless sowing. See you in the chat. Rock and roll. Hello, love. Got Maya, got Will, got Sandy. I've got that link pinned up there. We got just a few more minutes left to go in this video. I know how painful it is. But we'll finish it off. We'll just finish this mofo right here.
If I could throw a little side note out there, apparently people take their pets when they've died, and they will have them cremated and take the carbon and have it pressed into diamonds. And it's almost shocking that people do that. They can wear Fluffy on their ring if they really want to. And
well,
that's
look
that
one option.
One
option available out
there.
So
there is one resource I do want to tell you guys about. Dr. David Minton was an incredible anatomist. Worked here at the Ministry of Answers in Genesis. He also worked at Washington University School of Medicine before he retired there. He has this amazing set called Body of Evidence. And what he did in Body of Evidence, he goes through the entire human body. And that's what he was. He was an anatomist and a teacher, and he runs through just about every single part of the human body. And I know we talked about babies and their heartbeat and all that. I mean, he was an expert at that kind of stuff. And just garnering from the wisdom that he had on the human body is just amazing. So this is done as an entire curriculum, Body of Evidence curriculum. There's an
excellent study guide for kids that goes with this. If you want to use it as a curriculum at home, we highly recommend.
So you got that physical set there, or at answers.tv. Resources like this are available to you. You can have access to those unlimited things and find subscription-free 7-day trial to check those things out, especially Unlocking Science. It's the best, but I'm biased. And then we also have a great magazine called Answers Magazine. This has really their fields of expertise, and if it's in one, you've got the full magazine for the adults, and then it has an Unlocking Science feature in there where we're
get this and have it shipped over here. That's what the digital is so wonderful for. We have a lot of people get it.
Okay, so then we'll let the rest of that, be what it is. They're obviously advertising their own brand. It's a lot of answers in Genesis. So I've been doing that every week over on Patreon. Um, sorry. Hello. I was just doing kind of an impromptu stream this evening, kind of trying to think about what I was going to do moving forward. I've got some new books to read, doing that here over at Stupid Monkey Philosophy, and trying to find different content from creationists to review on Patreon. And I'll probably be moving a bit of that over here to the Trusty 8 podcast while I'm looking for some new guests to interview. So that's kind of what I got going on here. Big thank to my Patreon supporters, Secular Pagan Mum. Anybody who comes over there, I'm going to be introducing a $1 Patreon tier. So we've got the 3, 5, and 10. I'll be doing $1 Patreon tier and kind of spreading out some of the perks over there. And different content I'm producing. I'm trying to figure out how to make shorts. I keep kind of trying to push myself to make longer videos, but I feel like sometimes maybe shorter is better. And so that's what I'm looking at right now. Oh, I closed it out. So we'll look at a little more cheerful YouTube video, I think, in my watch later here. If it will load up for me. You know what? I haven't heard from Mr. Matt Dillahunty in a long friggin' time. So I think we're gonna go with that one. If you haven't seen the new Atheist Debates video, I'm gonna go ahead and put that up here. If anybody else wants to join in, feel free to come in. I'm just kind of riding the storm out. It's the day after my birthday, and trying to just work on baby steps, accomplish little things day by day. And that's kind of where I'm at in life right now. So this is just one of those things, staying on top of it, staying just kind of out there in the open, doing something so I'm not too stagnant. So go ahead and start this video. If anybody wants to hop in, feel free.
The Atheist Debates Patreon project presents God is Just Pretend. Hey, everybody, welcome. I'm still wearing the eye patch for a little while. Hopefully, it'll still heal on its own. But for those of you who pay attention to what clothing I wear in these videos, some of you are like, hang on a minute, Matt's wearing a t-shirt. I don't think he's ever worn a t-shirt in any of these videos before. He always wears a collar shirt and looks, at least semi-professional. You're probably right. And why are you paying that much attention to what I wear? But today I wore this shirt for a very good reason. This is one of my all-time favorite t-shirts. And yet, for the longest time, I barely wore it out in public. And I wanted to talk about why and why I've kind of changed my mind. The shirt, I mean, you can see the God part already, but the shirt just says God is just pretend. And I bought it, I don't know, right shortly after I first started publicly identifying as an atheist. So I've had this shirt for 20 some odd years now. And it's comfortable, but once I started talking about the subject and I got an understanding of the burden of proof and how claims require evidence, and if you make a claim, you have to back it up, it struck me that I was walking around making a claim that God is merely pretend. And how do you back that up? Now, we've talked before about burden of proof, and I'll touch on it briefly here, but one of the aspects is that if you're going to make a case for something, it should be reasoned and evidence-based. And it's very, very difficult to demonstrate the truth of something that's kind of a universal negative. I can say there's no evidence that there's a God in the palm of my hand, but to make a universal declaration that God is just pretend is a little different. And it's a little different from just saying, hey, universally speaking, we don't have evidence that is sufficient to warrant concluding that a God exists. And so I remain unconvinced. And this was both a matter of intellectual honesty. I don't want to run around claiming, your God is just pretend. In fact, it's not. That would be just as much a mistake as the people who run around saying, God's going to get you when he's probably not. There's no reason to think that that's the case. Um,
Hit the wrong button again. Sorry. I was going to respond to Matt there. No, I mean, well, there's a difference, though, a wholly different argument, which we were kind of talking about earlier over on Tom Rabbit's channel, I think, in saying that God is just pretend. And it was being talked about more on the Afrohumanist channel about Jesus being a fictional character, right? Those are two different arguments, two different lines of argumentation. Whether the God Yahweh or the Abrahamic God or whatever you call it is a fiction, and whether the character of Jesus is a fiction, whether those two can properly be correlated to one another, right? Those are like two completely different arguments. All right, my bad for the interruption. We'll continue with the video.
and that required a lot of thought on my part to get over that hurdle of, this feels like I am unnecessarily shifting the burden of proof. If you think about it, we've talked about it with regard to court cases before. The prosecution has to demonstrate the truth of their assertions against the defendant. It would be a mistake for a defendant to come in and act as if they could prove their innocence when they may not be able to. And
Well, those are like separate courts, though, because you have on the one hand this in criminal court you are innocent until proven guilty, but in other courts it's not necessarily the case. So our legislation differs if you're talking about U.S. law in matters in like civil and family matters in that regard. So.
the reason that we put that burden of proof on the prosecution is, there's many reasons, one of which is that we're more concerned about convicting innocent people than we are that some guilty people might go free. And also, it may be the case that it's impossible, as a practical matter of reality, to demonstrate that you're innocent. If I was sitting home at home alone, and I don't have any recordings or evidence that I was home alone, that's all I can say is I was home alone when the crime occurred. Then it just comes down to whether or not you believe that I was home alone. Doesn't
I think like this is like the question of suicide. Like if you commit suicide, are you committing an injustice against society? Well, ultimately, yes, somebody has to come and clean up your body, but at the end of your lifespan, that's going to be the case anyway, regardless of whether you take your own life or you expire by some other causes, right? But people will kind of revert to it. Well, somebody's going to have to clean it up. Well, that's true anyways. So we still failed to kind of meet the point there.
in any way demonstrate. I can't provide evidence that I wasn't there, or that I didn't arrange to create evidence of me being at home when there was a crime committed. And strategically, I've repeatedly pointed out to people that I feel that it's a great mistake to shift the burden of proof. We've dealt with this mostly when it comes to things like mythicism. There are some mythicists who are really irritated with me, and that's fine. I don't bear them any ill will, and I generally think that they are on the track to something that is not wholly unreasonable. But when you claim as an assertion, Jesus never existed, he was just a mythical figure, you've now made a claim and you're adopting a burden of proof. We've had this conversation. I'll probably get David Fitzgerald back on again at some point to talk about it more, because I love talking to him about it. Even though we disagree, we always kind of get somewhere and learn something in this.
I don't think that's necessarily the case. Like, I think you can say that there is a lack of historical evidence for the existence of Jesus outside of there's a term for it, right? But it's not eyewitness accounts. Like, most of the people who wrote about Jesus never met him. The people who claimed to have met Jesus are specious at best, right? They're not really reliable witnesses. And they're all certainly biased in the case. So I don't think, I think the burden of proof still rests firmly upon the Christians. But yeah, if you were to say Yahweh never existed, well, then you're fighting all of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam collectively, and then you have a whole different set of problems to work with.
But at the end of the day, I would say that it was a mistake to assert that Jesus didn't exist unless you have, rock solid, concrete, strong evidence to prove it. It shouldn't just sound like a conspiracy theory of this aligns with this, aligns with this. I didn't do this video to beat up on mythicists because I'm still largely in agree with him on the principles, and we certainly are both in the position that we don't believe that Jesus was divine, and largely speaking, we don't believe that a God exists, or we may in fact believe that no gods exist, or we may in fact believe that God is just pretend, whether it's the result of sort of abductive best explanation for the various gods that have been proposed and believed by people is that human beings made them up. Now, that's part of the reason that I wouldn't generally wear the shirt out in public. One of the other ones is that I, believe it or not, I don't run around seeking to offend people. I do a call-in show. I do several call-in shows, and
I don't know how I feel about that statement. I mean, I think at this point there is evidence that Matt has done enough of these call-in shows. On some level, he is looking to get the better of some of the callers, which is part of the fun of the show. Sandy, sorry it took me so long to read your comment. That was a couple minutes ago, but I got, not if I do it outside, they won't. Well, there's a number of things that we can do in public. Well, okay, I won't get into that. I got Will in the back. Godless sewing. Bring you in here.
Hello, hello. I lost my voice, so I might sound more cranky than usual.
All right, yeah, a little scratchy. I thought I'd be worse today. I felt like a sore throat coming on last night, and then it just like miraculously got better this morning, even though I didn't pray or anything.
I'm honestly a loudmouth, and 3 days ago I lost my voice. It was from having way too much fun, so I'm okay with it.
Well, as long as that's the case, as long as it's not like a shit show, that's usually my thing. Either, like I got into a shouting match with someone, or something.
That's
I've had a
usually the
couple of
case.
instances where I like lost my voice from performing, and those were usually like really good nights. But they were pretty rare. Like when you're just so hyped up, you kind of what you're doing physically.
Oh yeah. Ever since I got divorced, I don't lose my voice as much as I used to. So I was listening to what you said about Dillahunty, and I kind of agree with you. Where at this point, how many years has he been doing the show?
Yeah, it's over 20, I think. He's been doing it like over 20 years. It's a long ass time.
Personally, I would be jaded. That's just me. I'm really not into Matt Dillahunty because when I first got into atheism, my introduction to Matt Dillahunty was him yelling at people. And I was kind of in a weird spot in my life, so I didn't watch a lot of his content.
when I got into the atheist experience, that was like right after I got into like Sam Harris and those guys. And then I jumped like fully into it, and I was immersed. I was watching every week, and then it took me like months until I realized like, we're having the same conversations like over and over again, and then it started to annoy me. But I couldn't understand why. Like there were a couple of friends of mine who was like, "You're gonna love this," and then like 5 minutes into it, they're like, "I don't like this at all." It's like, what's wrong with you? But I got so immersed in it. Maybe that was just the period I was going through, you know?
I'll tell you, like I deal with a lot of evangelical Christians, and I don't dunk on them. I don't feel a need to be like, oh, I'm superior because I'm an atheist. Like, believe if you're not harming me, like, hey man, it's not my place to judge you. You know, if you're not coming at me, I could care less. So because I have that frame of mind, like for as argumentative as I seem, I'm not into arguing with people. Even though that always seems to that's what happens, but you know.
So I find like for me, I end up having these arguments with like family members and friends where it tends to do more harm to the relationship. Where it's like, I think Matt's approach is like, well, if I have this conversation with a stranger, and then I'm not really like, you know, attacking them, and I don't have to deal with them tomorrow. You know what I mean? And I can understand that on a certain level. Like, you know, I'm not nearly as offended when I have these arguments with theists on the internet as I am in real life. You know what I mean?
It depends on the situation because of the clothes I wear. I have been approached before, and some guy was shaking and yelling Romans at me. and I'm like, nowadays I'm like, oh, I should have pulled my phone out, but I was like, what's wrong with you, sir? Like what? But it was I have a patch. It's a cross, and it says "We believe in lies," and it does start fights with people.
Yeah, I used to have I got it taken from me when I went to juvenile hall that one time years ago, but I used to have a crucifix, and I found it on the street, and the Jesus, who was it was a 24 karat gold crucifix, and the Jesus that was mounted on it was like, you know, pinned on there with a central pin that had loosened, so the Jesus would turn, and as I was walking, he would flip upside down, and then flip back right side up, and flip upside down again. It ended up being confiscated, but that used to piss people off when they would see it and they'd see Jesus hanging upside down on the cross. They just lose their shit.
Do you know, I am one of those people where I'm old school, so I ask a lot of questions. Like, people consider that assault if you tell them to F off, but those same people would walk up to you and tell you to F off because you're not wearing something that they like. It's weird to me. But if I walk to them and be like, oh, you're a Christian, F off, they would call the cops on me, you know. But they walk up to me because I have a patch and they're like, you're an atheist. You must defend all atheism right now, you know. It's strange behavior.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's double standards built into the program, and so it's like, yeah, well, love your neighbor unless they're an atheist, because you know what God said about atheists, like, and they all kind of secretly subscribe to that mentality.
And it doesn't bother me, but the thing is, it's happening more because I feel like evangelical Christians feel like they have a green light to harass people. And you know, we always go back to the T word and we blame the orange guy, but all that hatred was there before him. So, you know, all he did was open the door. These people are making the choice to actively seek out people and harass them.
Even under, like, I realized more like under Clinton, like a lot of people thought of Clinton as a really liberal guy, but he promoted and endorsed a lot of really like religiously backed policies and like that he was against same-sex marriage, and he did the whole, you know, the Bible says one woman, one man, that whole thing. It's even against polygamy on that level, which is endorsed in the Bible, so it doesn't even make sense.
Exactly. I get trashed for this, but Kamala Harris actively sought out LGBTQIA people of color and put them in jail. So I'm not a fan of her at all. And I know
I've heard that before. So, and she was, remind me, like she was, before she was
She was state prosecutor.
district attorney, right?
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, as she rose the ranks, but one of the reasons why she rose is because she was no nonsense with people of color. Like no
Right.
nonsense. And if you were any kind of LGBTQIA, she wouldn't respect your pronouns. She would openly disrespect people in court, and she got famous for being a TERF.
Kind of like, I remember Obama got kind of reamed for, when he came in, he did the whole kind of pull yourself up by your bootstrap speech. And everybody's like, okay, we've heard that shit before. But
Oh, that pisses me off because I would be living in my car if it wasn't for my parents. Like that pisses me off too. You know, not everybody has the benefit of like, oh, pick your stuff. Like when Kim Kardashian was like, oh, you just need to get a job. Like she's not even in the same universe of people who actually have to go out and get a real job, you know?
yeah, or for that matter, would be on like the same level of competition as, say, like a real entry level, like a graduate student or something. Like she would automatically have privilege because of her notoriety.
Oh,
And they just don't get that.
oh, sorry. Maya, it's actually people that are not of color who trash me. I won't say the person's name, but I got trashed online. Oh, hold on one second. Hold on. Keep going, but I gotta it makes me sound bougie, but I have to pay my gardener. Hold on one second.
No, do it. Do what you got to do. I think it just means like generally amongst liberals, like we're all trying to kind of push a certain agenda. Is I heard a lot of people say, well, vote Biden because he's more likely to beat Trump rather than like Bernie. And I don't like Biden much myself. I mean, but it is like a matter of choosing the lesser of two evils at this point. Like I feel like I still, in the local elections, I will vote green, I will vote independent, but in the national elections, it feels like if you do that, you truly are throwing your vote in the garbage. And a lot of liberals will, it seems like on the internet, just trash you for it outright. If you're going third party, you're wasting your vote, and fuck you. So I think that's probably where Will's coming from here. I don't know though. And Kamala's kind of the same. All right, welcome back. I tried to make your point for you, but I don't know if I did it justice. So,
What's that?
why you get trashed for trashing Kamala Harris for her?
It's because propaganda works, and so she got put up as anti-Trump, and people don't know her track record because as Americans we do not do research on our politicians. And so these people get presented to us and we're like, oh, I like their haircut. Oh, they look like me. And so we vote for them, not knowing they're like literally against everything that we stand for.
See, my thought was also in the last couple of elections, because I tried to vote for Bernie, and it was like I had a lot of people saying, well, you're just throwing your vote in the garbage if you're doing that. And that was how I felt. That's kind of how I feel generally. Like I was saying, in local elections, I'll try to vote green or independent or something like that. But in the national elections, it feels like the general temperature is that if you're doing that, you're wasting your time and you're not helping anyone.
Absolutely. That's why I voted for her and Joe Biden, because I didn't want Trump to still be president, But in a lot of ways, it's because I said that she was worse than Trump, and somebody who did not know her track record called me out on Twitter, and I was like, I don't fight people on Twitter. Do some research, But politicians.
All right, well, I'm interested though. How or why was she worse than Trump? Is it because she's a person of color in general, or her policies? Like,
Yes, but it's kind of a personal thing of people of color who attack their own people who are already downtrodden or who attack anyone who's downtrodden. Let's take race out of it. She attacked people who were at the bottom rung and were in the situation they are because of we have huge ghettos here in Los Angeles, you know. So they're stuck in this crappy system, and of course they have to do nefarious things to make money. Like that's just the way it is here, you know. Kamala Harris attacked the LGBTQIA plus community, and if you were trans, she would make sure you got prison time. She would make sure. I'm gonna look into it more because next time I'm called out on it. But she wreaked havoc, and Trump was a general disruption, but he didn't target just Armenian people or just Korean people. Kamala Harris went after people who look like her on purpose, you know.
Yeah, I mean that sounds like generally correct. Oop, I hit the wrong one. Generally correct to me.
So I just don't, and because I'm a little bit older, I'm from that generation of no matter how bougie, no matter how different somebody is, they're still part of a downtrodden community. So be kind to them. And I'm not saying that I'm kind to every person I come across. I'm just not mean to people for no reason, you know. And I don't let my politics. Oh, sorry.
There's like a sense that in the political arena, like just as you can't make it as an atheist, you can't make it to a certain level if you openly support LGBTQIA people. You just won't get the votes. I mean, and that's a big problem in a lot of the country. I think California has resolved that to some extent, but I think there's a lot of states where that's not the case, right? Like,
absolutely.
People will be pushed out of the race because they can't make it to primary because X amount of, people in their district or whatever. Like, but I also think there's some of that, like, it is in the Constitution. Like, even though we have like church state separation, they still have this whole like kind of, because God is on the money, it's in the Constitution. Like, we can justify why our political leaders can't be atheist or humanist, right? Like it's kind of like you can opt out of swearing on the Bible, but it kind of makes you look bad,
Very true. I've always thought about that because I go to court every once in a while, and I always thought, like, what would really happen if you didn't swear on the Bible, like in a real trial? You were like, no, give me Moby Dick. I see more validity in Moby Dick than the Bible. Tell you the honest truth.
I mean, that it's definitely a better book. So
Sandy, thank you for saying that I'm young. Thank you. No, but I'm just saying, like, okay, in America, how come they don't swear on the Quran? What would they think of me if I was like, do you have the Quran? Can I swear on that?
Well, we have a politician now who's like shamed for shit like that. Like, she wears her hijab in the Senate and swears on the Quran, and now they're like, no, now we've got Islam infiltrating the government. It's like, no, that's true equality. You have real equal representation coming in, right?
So how is that not considered like bigoted or racist when they call her jihad squad or whatever? Because I'm friends with a lot of people on Facebook who are extremely conservative, because I'm from an extremely conservative place. And it's weird to me where I'm like, that's racist? Is that, I'm not a Muslim. I don't know what you would call it. Like, what would you call it? Like, I don't call people out because of their religion either,
Well, I mean, I think anything at this point, I mean, if it's not pro-choice, I don't, it's not really racist. It is like really theologically based. Like, there's no other explanation. They're not actually defending her rights, like as a woman or as a Muslim. Like they're or rather rejecting those rights, right? Like, they're defending it on a religious basis. Like, and that's
one of those things.
That's the problem. What happened?
I think I don't know. I just find modern day politics really childish. If I don't like somebody, I'm gonna talk about your politics. Like, no, your budget stinks. I don't care about what your shoes look like. I don't care. I want to get down to the facts.
Yeah, I mean,
And modern day politics is about a popularity contest.
yeah, it's very much like entertainment value, shock value, and a lot of personal attacks that have nothing to do with the policies. And that's another big problem. A lot of the policies really, like when you get into it, the things they end up endorsing end up being pretty much along the same lines. Like a lot of the wars we get in the media are just for show. And then when it comes down to it, if they want to continue operating, they conduct business as usual, and we're none the wiser.
It all comes down to how much can they slowly take from you. That's what every politician, they have all these grandiose ideas, but it always comes down to how much you're going to pay taxes under that particular politician. Trump gave massive tax breaks to people who had houses over a certain value. He literally gave you $100,000, couple $100,000. Like, it just depends on who's in charge at the time, I guess.
Yeah, and it's all about the narrative they feed you, because conservatives feed the same bullshit to middle class Americans that liberals end up feeding to the wealthier, kind of entrepreneur, lately the tech elites and stuff. But they've had different variations of that over time. And they are truly progressive as far as like technological, scientific innovations. They are truly progressive in that regard, but there's like a carrot on a stick involved in the politics here. And it's hard to tell who's really holding the stick, at a lot of points. Like, is it the corporation or is it the politician?
And that's another thing that is driving me mentally insane lately. We've given our rights away to these corporations. I'm not going to get too far down the rabbit hole, but if I have a problem with my phone, they won't even talk to me. If I need help with my Apple computer because I'm not tech savvy, it literally depends on the technician if they're going to help me or not. I think we're slave to these companies, and it's just sad. As consumers, we let them tell us what to do, and it used to be the other way around.
The customer is not always right. And I like that definition I heard quite a while ago for Tracy Harris of government as a product. And as citizens, we're all consumers of that product, and it should, the system should function that way. If enough of us are unhappy with the product, they're going to have to repackage and remarket.
I'm like that with the cops. I almost got dragged out of a local meeting because I stood up and I was like, is anyone here actually for the police? Because our sheriffs, if you call them, it's like 50-50 if they'll show up, and they might put you in jail. So no one around here calls the cops. They're quite seriously useless. Literally.
Oh, I feel that. The last time I got arrested, the cops, I slept in front of the police station for a good 4 or 5 hours, then walked back to the scene of the alleged crime, which I was never charged with, right? Neither here nor there. And then sat there for an additional 2 to 3 hours before the cops showed up, right? And so this had been called in a full 8-9 hours prior. And then they finally show up, pick me up, and I'm peaceable. They're like, you know what we're here for? I'm like, I don't know. And so, yeah, it was just one of those things. They had to take me in because of the nature of the call. But
see, what does that even mean? What does that even mean? I'm sorry, but if they don't have, again, in old school America, if they can't prove anything, the worst thing they could do is give you a court date.
Yep.
And be like, here, show up at this date. We're going to yell at you, But now they arrest you. They do the same thing here. No
Well,
matter
as you
what.
know too, like in California, a lot of it is if you can pay bail, if you can, it's all a money game. Like if you have
Oh,
enough money, you can get out of a lot of things.
it's
Uh,
so sad but true. I recently, I've I got my car towed. Okay, I got pulled. I made a video about it. This was months ago, but I inherited my dad's car. He had an old school fix-it ticket on it. But really, I got my car towed because I told the cop, like, tow my car. I'll pay for that SHIT. And he was like, oh, really? Like, I challenged him and he towed my car and left me stranded out in the middle of Ventura. But the one crazy thing is that pot's legal. So the cop was like, oh, you forgot your weed and gave me my weed back. It's crazy laws here in California. But in the end, when I called, they were like, oh, you could just pay the ticket. And I'm like, oh, I got caught up in your scheme. And it ended up being $5,000. Okay. I asked people, like, what would happen if you had a $5,000 charge that you'd have to pay, like, within a couple days?
yeah.
You know, like,
Or
would you
I mean,
would you
that's
be
like your bail. Under some circumstances, like come
and Dylan,
$5,000, $10,000 now, and we'll let you out of jail. Otherwise, you're going to be sitting here over the weekend. You know what I mean? Like it's the difference
they
between losing 3 days of your life.
they muscled me for my car. They basically extorted $5,000 out of me for my car. You know, I was pissed. And you know what's so sad? I haven't gone back to Ventura since. And I used to spend a ton of money out there, but I don't go anymore because I'm like, F the cops.
Yeah.
I'm so mad. I'm like, dude, like, you guys muscled me. Like, what is the point of you? What is the point? Back in the day, even like, I'm from the 90s and those cops would beat you, but they were so loose. Like, if it wasn't a big deal, they didn't care. It was just different times, man. Nowadays, the cops they want to put you in jail because in California, prison is a big business here. I don't know if you know this, but between you and I, there's more prisons than anywhere else in America. Between where I'm sitting and between where you're sitting in Central California, more than even Texas.
Yeah, and I think we have like higher capacity, right? Like each of our prisons is we house more inmates. Yeah.
Because we have the space, because Central California is unincorporated land. And that's why, like, if you've ever taken a Greyhound, when you get to Central California, there is a prison almost at every stop. It's the saddest thing. And I don't feel sorry for the fact that these prisons are massive employers. Like, find something else to do. Find something else to do.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of COs are kind of really just corrupt security guards. Like they're trained to do the same thing a security guards trained to do, except they're permitted to just whip the shit out of people because they're and incarcerated individuals are pretty much like well, now it's gotten a little easier because there's so many cameras, but you still have just so much corruption going on in those places.
And your 13th Amendment is suspended when you in the state of California. They tell you when you get arrested. I remember the first time I got popped, like, for real. They were like, hey, once you're arrested, your 13th Amendment is gone.
Right.
So you're a slave. You're property at that point,
Yeah. I was discussing with somebody else. At least we're somewhat lucky and we've revolutionized in paying our prisoners a little better for their labor. A little bit. You know what I mean? It's still horrible, but we pay them a little bit for their labor, which didn't used to be the case. And it's not the case in all states.
True. But they just reinforced the law here in California. They basically said, like, because they were trying to get rid of it, and the state of California was like, no, we want to keep that because we have a massive prison system here now.
Yeah. Well, and they make revenue off what they sell to the prisoners. I mean, that's another thing. People like they give them money for their labor, which is already pennies on the dollar. and then they turn around and spend those, for like, triple what they're worth or whatever. And it's crazy, which, really makes you think, because like commodities in a prison are so much cheaper, and you think, like, they're buying top ramen, they're buying the same thing that you're buying, but they're buying it for like 16 cents a pack, right? And you're paying $1. So, and they're profiting off of that 16 cents. So how much are they profiting off of you?
Dude, I was feeding so hard for hot sauce one time. I paid $1 for like little Tapatio packets, like 10 of them, where at a restaurant, you'd get it for free.
Yeah, I think, anything that's considered like a relish or a garnishment is like twice as much, right, in the system. Like,
Sandy, in LA County, they went from bologna sandwiches and ramen to burritos. It was really weird. They have these like, it was really weird. It was weird because they were decent. They were like the kind you could buy at the store. Strangest things. But don't go to jail, kids. Don't go to jail. If you're watching this in the future, jail is not fun.
Yeah, no fun.
I'm not promoting it. I'm just saying in LA County, this was a while ago, they had burritos. Well, it was a welcome change from rotten bread and bologna, Felt like I was on a pirate ship.
I'm always beloved in jail because I give all my bologna away. I'm like, here, you guys take it. Have it. It's free.
Oh, no. Honestly, I'm squeamish. So same. I'm squeamish. Like, there's certain things I just can't eat. Like, it won't be fun for everybody if you watch me retch. So, like... And LA's different. Like, you get beat up for being weird. So, like, you can't just be puking for no reason. Oh, good times. Good times.
For sure.
It's warrior school. Man, we've veered off. It's not that I dislike Dillahunty. I'm just not necessarily a fan of his style, and I haven't watched enough of his content to critique him. You know what I'm saying? I only see the Twitter side, so I judge that.
Yeah, it's very dry when it's like on Twitter, and then even like as much as he does on the Atheist Experience, it's not the same as when he does like the Line or whatever. And then he did the Hang Up, which is kind of like him embellishing on what he was doing on AXP, but it looks like he's like shying away from that now. And I always feel like the Atheist Debates is a lot different than that. I see him having like a lot better conversations. Like he's just, like you said, he's got the very low tolerance where he's jaded from so many years of doing the show. Because the older episodes, he didn't used to get like that as often as he does now. He's just very quick to just, tell people to fuck off.
And you know why? Because we naturally get annoyed of saying the same thing over and over. Like, I'm a parent. I could go from being smiley and laughy, like, hey, man, I told you to brush your teeth like an hour ago, to just, I told you 50 times, So I get it. You don't want to repeat yourself. My favorite thing was cheese and sexy rice. Oh, you're making me hungry. I still eat tuna. It took me a while. My son is obsessed with ramen, and it made me laugh because I was like, am I really buying this? Because I got to the point where I couldn't eat ramen.
Yeah, I've done that a few times myself. Like I live on it for a budget, but I also like tend to think like, well, when I eat ramen like every day, like I'm a little bit healthier just having the broth, and because I don't always like, I don't know, it's like a substitute for other stuff I don't eat. But then like if you eat too much of it, you get burnt out really fast.
Oh yeah.
Like, so I got like this fancy ramen bowl with a baby Yoda and the chopsticks on it, so it's like, okay, so now like it's more of an experience when I eat the ramen.
I'm the same as Sandy. Like, it's psychosomatic, but it makes me physically ill now. But it's literally all up here because I ate this stuff as a kid. Like I still eat Spam. That would make the average person throw up. So it's
I can't do Spam.
See, that's what I'm saying. And like like when my son makes ramen or a cup of noodles, I literally have to walk out of the room. But it's just from just not my
I'm
thing.
also like very particular. Like I can only do certain brands of ramen. Like I can do the Maruchan, but not the Nissin ones. I can't do the Nissin ramens. I don't like. Yeah, they're not good.
Do you have a 99-cent store by your house?
We have
Or in
Dollar
your-
Tree, but they're now like $1.25 and up.
But you don't have the 99-cent store?
No, they actually started taking those out over here. There's
That's
very few
so
of them
sad.
left. Yeah.
Oh, ours is like the $10 store now too. Dollar Tree too. It's a trip to walk in there and be like, why are you guys selling headphones? I thought this was the dollar store, But they have
Yeah. I've been getting my phone chargers there for a while because I was like, they're just as good.
same with headphones. I call them my feets, my fake beats.
Yeah.
But they have aisles and aisles of ramen, and same thing, that Nissan stuff, it makes me ill. I can't eat any of it. But like I said, like a long time ago, I ate 2/8 of magical mushrooms, and the most I'd ever had was half an eighth. Still to this day, my body rejects mushrooms because I
I've
overdosed
never had that
mushrooms.
problem.
My body's like, oh no, we're not doing this again.
I think I like edible mushrooms more now that I've had psilocybin so many times. Like I never used to eat them before, and now I'm like, oh yeah, I'll try that, even if it's like poisonous. That's great.
I was a junkie. As a kid, I was a junkie. I'm like, oh, what's this? Oh, I'll take it. I'll never forget. My friend was like, do you want to try some mescaline? And I was like, what's mescaline? He's like, here. My dumbass took it. As an adult, I would never, but as a
That's
kid,
like
you're
the
like,
time I tried ketamine, and they're just like, yeah, it's just another sleeping pill. Like, and I was like, oh yeah, cool.
duh. I look back and I'm like, wow, it's a miracle I'm alive. There was one time a friend of mine was like, hey, what are you doing this weekend? I was like, nothing. He's like, here, use my Visine. I said, okay. It was acid. He's like, you'll be tripping for the next 4 days. I was tripping for like 5. But it was like
that's
mellow.
harder than mine. Like
It was
because
like,
I took a gel tab my first time, and it was like a good 4 or 5 hours or something, but I was cool. And I was with friends, and the second time the dude gave me like a liquid, and he gave me like 2 drops on my hand. He's like, and it was I didn't come out of it for like a good 20 hours. It was like a full and I was fucking on it. Like, yeah.
That between that and being scared straight with mushrooms, that stopped my career of hallucinating. But when I dropped out of college, I took mescaline. I'm sorry, I took peyote, and I got it shut up my nose and everything. And let me tell you, that's real. That was on some Homer Simpson walking in the desert, but he's really in the golf course kind of stuff. I didn't even know that stuff existed until about 13, 14 years ago. I'd never heard of fentanyl before, ever.
Yeah, it just came on my radar over the last few years, and I guess they're cutting meth with it. Some people that I knew that I'd known from the meth days were like, this is what they're doing now. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. And a friend of mine actually like recently overdosed on that stuff, and he had been having trouble with opioids before that. And then, so the last time I saw him, he was using that. And he said, well, I've got it under control. And I was like, well, the guy's been taking like Oxycontin and stuff for years. So, but yeah, he ended up overdosing pretty quickly.
Just this past weekend, my ex-wife took my son to Arizona to a funeral for this Mexican gangster guy that we knew who OD'd in his car, and we think it was fentanyl because he was an ox of a human being. Just the definition. He had a good job. He worked at Honda, but we think he relapsed, and he died in his car. It was actually really sad, and they all went out to his funeral in Arizona. It was really sad. So that stuff's
Yeah.
real, man. That stuff's real.
Yeah, and I've heard. I actually put out a video I got from Institute of Human Anatomy a couple days ago where they were talking about it. Like, even people they're giving to it, like that are being prescribed the stuff, are still dying from it because the doctors can't even like accurately gauge how it's going to interact with different people. People who've like been on opioids for years and stuff. So yeah, it's just killing more people than it's helping. It seems like
there's a famous there's some footage if you type in like Los Angeles, it's either CHP or LAPD. The cop with no gloves brushes fentanyl and he passes out on camera. That's how hardcore that stuff is. I always knew they would invent a drug I never heard of, but that's ridiculous. My thing about drugs is that I always wanted to do something where I could enjoy myself. I have this thing about loss of control, you know? So there's a point where you get too high where you're just not in control anymore, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely have experienced that. I think I've experienced it a lot more with alcohol. With drugs,
Same.
it was like I was in control, but to a point where I had like the whole grandiosity thing, like the Scarface thing, like thinking I was invincible type of stuff, which isn't like the alcohol thing where I get to like not actually knowing or being in control of what I'm doing, which is what I'm afraid would happen if I was on opioids. But the couple of times I have tried like Oxy and stuff, I got really, really sick. And well, I tried Oxy once of my own volition. I got really, really sick. And then the couple of times I thought it was in whatever I was using later on, like something had been laced, the same thing happened. And then anytime I was like, oh no, this thing like immediately made me sick, so I must be allergic to this stuff. And like just went with that. So luckily that wasn't the issue. But like Sandy pointed out, they're saying with the fentanyl, it's a lot easier for them to lace it into other drugs, which I think they say they've been doing with heroin for a long time. And fentanyl's even more effective in that way, which just makes it more addictive, basically.
But as a businessman,
has the side effects. So.
But as a businessman, like, why would you want to kill your customers? It doesn't make sense to me. So I would never introduce a deadly drug into something. You know, like you don't want to kill the people that you're trying to sell drugs to. It's just a sad day. Like on our local news, they're like basically sticking up for the crack dealers. They're like, you know, don't smell crack because there's laced with fentanyl. Don't do heroin, and like, don't blame your dealer. I heard that on the news and I was like, what world do I live in that the news is sticking up for drug dealers? But that stuff is everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's different justifications for that. Like, you know, most of your corner dealers aren't the guys who are doing this, the actual supplying. A lot of these drugs now are being imported from other countries because our demand is so great. We can't make enough of our own drugs, apparently. So that's kind of the way they portray it. And
I saw this thing on PBS that in America, out of all the countries in the world, we do 76% of the illicit drugs around the world. That's why every country that makes drugs brings their drugs here. And if you think about how, like, if you put our population up against China, we're nothing. Pick a country in Africa, they outnumber us 5-1. You know, the entirety of America, you know. But we do more drugs than any country in the world.
But I think, you know, China also punishes drug offenders by death, right? So, I mean, you wouldn't even know because those people would have been friggin' executed.
That is true. I've actually been to 2 countries that were ruled by religion, and it's no joke. It is Afro-humanist. It's no joke. It is no joke. Especially a Muslim country, they do not mess around. Like, they tell you, don't do drugs here. They'll just tell you, like, don't do drugs here. You don't want to know what happens when we catch you.
And like was that WNBA star who got caught in Russia, right? Recently, with like weed and got
I want
I think they got her out of it, but
no, she's not. Is she back?
well, I think they were talking about making a deal. I don't know if it's been finalized, but they
If
were
they-
negotiating.
She got sentenced to a gulag. Right now, she's literally busting rocks or making bombs. She's doing some real like slave stuff right now.
That's crazy.
Hey, Esther, like when if Brittany Griner ever does come back, she's gonna be like, no, man, like they sentenced her to hard labor. Like, I don't think the average person realized that. Like, I've seen a Mississippi chain gang, and I thought that was inhumane. Imagine what the Russians are doing.
Well, I'm going to
Like,
say, as long as our relationships at this point don't change with Russia, I'm sure there will be some kind of non-disclosure agreement where she wouldn't be able to talk about that upon her release, unless we were to take down Putin and the regime and change our relations with Russia. I mean, we've been helping them maintain kind of that position to be able to continue operating like that, which is the way they've been for a long time, as far as I understand. So,
but as a pothead, I weep for Brittany Griner.
yeah, that's the insanity. And like, North Korea is the same way. There's a lot of countries. If you go there, even with weed, they're going to put you in for life or some horrible shit.
That's crazy to me. That's just, but I take it for granted because I can go to the store and purchase marijuana and drive in my car and go home and smoke it, But see, there's two sides to that too, because Brittany Griner pulled a Whitney Houston. Do you know when we were young, Whitney Houston got busted for weed in LAX? She came from Hawaii. She had a pound of Maui Wowie in her purse. And they stopped her. They're like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "I'm Whitney Houston. I'm gonna take it." And they arrested her ass. But her real answer was like, "I'm famous. I can do whatever I want." And I think Brittany Griner kind of suffered from that same delusion because she's
Right,
famous
yeah.
in Russia. She's famous. She's a famous basketball player in Russia. They love her. They treat her like a god. So she's like, "Oh, I could probably smoke weed in Russia like I do in America." And no, they're not playing.
Well, you see a lot of that, like, with famous people, they can just like smoke in the theater where their fans will be like, sit there, like, I got to go outside, and then they'll just like light up on the stage. And there's just like different performers as they travel, I think, usually get to know, like, especially in the entertainment industry, they know where and when they're going to get away with that. And I think, like, I don't think in the athletic realm, I don't think they've really like gauged where that ends at this point. Because up until a few years ago, you couldn't be in a professional athletic like a cooperative or institution. You couldn't function in there and use any kind of drug, like even up to like caffeine or nicotine was like,
Oh yeah.
because they're all supposed to be super clean and stuff. And so now,
Well,
like, more athletes coming out as smoking weed and stuff like that, like, kind of changed the whole game for them, right? Because before it was all about steroids and shit like that.
I don't know about any other sport, but in the NBA, they don't test for pot anymore.
Right.
So the WNBA is probably the same because, like, I think there's only, 11 states that pot's not legal in America anymore. And these are in major markets, so most of these people are smoking. Gone are the days where people are getting arrested for pot. So, why are you going to test people? I don't know, but it gives you a false arrogance. Like, I cry for Brittany Griner, but like, she tried to pull a Whitney Houston. It's so sad. It's so sad. And I love Whitney, and I'm tired of people trashing Whitney Houston. I'm tired of the Whitney movies.
No, I mean, but it's a great example. And like anybody who's pulling that, don't you know who I am? I mean, that's like the ultimate celebrity Karen move, right? Like, you're just like, It doesn't matter if I'm still doing my job. I don't give a fuck what your job is,
I think Reese Witherspoon too on camera got pulled over in Alabama or something, and she's like, "Don't you know who I am?" Cops didn't care either. That makes me laugh when because in LA you can get away with that. Like Will Smith could walk in somewhere, slap somebody, and not get arrested. If I did that, I would get like 3 months in county.
Yeah.
3 full months in county,
For sure. All right, wait. So, all right, we totally derailed again. Do you want to go back to this Matt Dillahunty video, see what he has to say here, like for the rest of this? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, but I'm just gonna say I'm a outside observer because my atheism is I do not believe in any gods or anything from there, and then I move on. I have a view on Dillahunty that like this is his shtick, but after a while, like you said, it's been 20 years. And he's not talking about sewing. He's not talking about sewing.
No. But let's see what you think here, because I feel like in this video he's been really honestly like refuting his own position a little bit. He's like actually arguing against the absurdity. He's not saying, well, he's like, well, your God is just pretend is a bad argument, right? Like that is what he's saying. So, and we all know it is. Like that's just us trying to kick dirt in the face of the theist at that point. So,
hey, Bree.
What's up, Brain Bug? Hive Science. Good to see you.
I want to say really quick. About a week ago on Sofa's channel, I rolled a J that was like 6 papers. And I was like, Matt Powell, this is for you, you punk. Matt Powell has beyond ticked me off. If I ever see him in person, I'm going to call him out.
Matt Powell is such a puppet, though. Like when you really look at him, like, I mean, it's hard to not feel like he's like some kind of twisted altar boy. Like that's how I see Matt Powell. Like,
you can't. It's just ironic. Somebody talking about grooming all this stuff when he was groomed. He was groomed to be this. He's a robot, like you said. He's a puppet. It's sorry. I'm the king of derailment, but Matt Powell drives me just. I saw a terrible video that Matt Powell made about Bree, and I was it got my blood going. Like it got me pissed off.
It's totally understandable. All right, I'll start the video. Just let me know if you want me to stop to make any, at any point,
Okay.
All right.
And I want people to call in, and I would love more than anything for them to be able to have good conversations. One of the problems is that most theists that are likely to call into a call-in show are not remotely prepared to have the conversations. They are not well versed in the relevant subjects, logic and reason, the nature of evidence. These are people who they sincerely believe, in part because either they were raised to or they had some experience that they couldn't explain, and God became an explanation for it. But when it comes to presenting reasoned arguments backed by evidence, they are ill-equipped. And in part, I would argue, I know some people are going to throw a fit about this, it's because even the greatest apologists out there are failing. They're not able to produce the evidence that they would like to be able to produce. And so
all right, we can go from there. What do you think?
I agree with that, but my argument would be, then why do you still engage? Like I don't plan on arguing with Antangelo or Darth Dawkins because I'm not on that side anymore. I don't believe that any of it even needs to be talked about. Maybe it's because I'm a nihilist and I'm like, we should all just hug it out. But like, I don't know. I agree.
So I think I should clarify. I'm not sure if you probably don't follow it, Will, from what you said, but Matt's actually left the ACA, so he's no longer doing the atheist experience. He said he was going to do a response to that or like an explanation of that. I don't think this is that. Well, I'm not sure if this is that or if this is just like a part of building up to that. But so this is like Matt's leaving the atheist experience. Maybe that would make a difference in like what he's saying here.
It makes sense because I would get so tired. I'm digging the Slick Rick eye patch though. I am digging it. That's hardcore. But I don't have a problem with Matt Dillahunty. I actually agree with a lot of things that he says. Again, it's the argumentative side of like what he just said. It's people who call the show are people who haven't read the Bible who just want to argue.
Yeah. A lot of it is definitely that, or people who have read the Bible but only like read selectively. Like but that is what a lot of modern Christians do. I think that's what Matt successfully called out on the show, is that, you know, the people who were genuinely interested in the conversation, like once they got on there and realized that they didn't know what they were talking about, some of them really deconverted. Like, and that's kind of a big issue, is a lot of people who are new into this, once they start like, you know, really reading the Bible, they start to question it before they get so like deeply entrenched into it that they can't let go of it.
I agree with you. I think because I'm like I'm in this weird phase of like, okay, I'm an atheist. What else do you have? Because arguing about the Bible with Christians is it's just a circle. It's just this giant circle of going around and around. Because when I have discussion with other atheists, we may disagree on things, but there will be a basic consensus, you know, or even people that are deists, or, you know, it just seems like when it comes down to Abrahamic religions, it's just after a certain point, like I just don't see a point in arguing.
Yeah, there's a lot of people it's like that with. I mean, so I was at a meeting, a recovery meeting, at a church with another guy, right, who I was introduced to last week, and I saw he was one of the few people that I actually talked about faith with. Like most everybody else, we were just talking about music and sobriety or whatever else. But when this guy and I actually got engaged in conversation in private, I revealed that I wasn't a believer, and he immediately went on the defensive. You can't have sobriety if you don't have Christ. You need Christ for X. You need Christ for Y. But the look of in his eyes was fear. It was like a deer in the headlights. He started repeating very common arguments, but he was afraid that I was going to, and I didn't sit there and debate with him. I just kind of nodded and said, okay, that's good to know. Thanks for talking to me, you know, and just disengaged. But I saw the look of fear in his eyes, just being face to face with that person. So I think he himself was still even questioning it, you know what I mean? But I felt like it would have been irresponsible for me to you know, dismantle this man's faith at this, you know, at this point. Like he's
totally.
obviously struggling with his own sobriety and things like that.
I'm because of my parents' age, I'm friends with a lot of senior citizens. And I have a friend named Linda who actually made me a blanket and brought it to me today. But we had a mutual friend who passed away, and I didn't even know. But they were they were all talking, and I was kind of, you know, when in wakes everybody cooks, so I'm in the kitchen eating all the good food. And they said, she asked her, she was like, what does he believe in? And she's like, oh, don't you know he's English? He was an atheist. And they've known each other for over 50 years, and they never talked about religion because he was smart. But my friend Linda instantly was like, he's going to hell. And the whole room got quiet because we're at this man's wake, and she's like saying he's going to hell, you know? And I didn't know how to react.
Yeah, it's over the top when they're just like, this is, you know.
And I told her, I'm an atheist, and she adores me. She loves me. We're in a so she got me in. Could you imagine me with my patches? I walk in a room with a bunch of 70-something-year-old women reeking of pot, and we all sew together. It's fun. But like basically she's I don't know if she's nicer to me because she's trying to convert me, but like she's really nice to me, you know? But she's just a good person. She's one of those people that, like, even if she wasn't a Christian, she would be helping people. She's a nurse. She just naturally helps people, you know?
Yeah, you definitely get that sense from certain people that that's kind of their calling, and they're humanists in that regard, regardless of whatever faith they'd be in, you know. So
Exactly. But it's so weird to me when Christians are like, because to me, I'm over it. And she's like, she's in her 70s. And, you know, I'm friends like her. I grew up with her daughters that were like family. And like, it's weird to me to see them they're still scared of hell. And they're still scared that other people are going to go to hell. It's just weird to me. I don't know. Maybe I've moved on too much. You know.
yeah. Well, I want to say this to Sandy. I'm very sorry to hear about that, and I think a lot of people conflate the idea of hell with like their suffering here in this life, and like a lot of it is just a failure to cope with suffering that they experience, and that's the fear of hell. A lot of it is just fear based, and staying in that fear based mentality, even though they proclaim to be, you know, saved and safe through Jesus and God. Ultimately, the whole faith is like based in fear of this or that thing, whether it be demons or Satan or hell. Like there's always the fear of some worse torment than what you're already experiencing, which is like the basic tenet of the belief.
Am I wrong that the devil is more of an invention than less than just a couple lines in the Bible?
No, yeah, I think people say a lot more about hell or proclaim to know a lot more about hell than what is actually said in the Bible. And even as far as the angels and demons go, there's like extensive lore. It's like fan fiction. They write it about these angels and demons, but it's not really in the Bible.
Because I'll hear people, you know, I see the psychos on Twitter that are, you know, the Greg Locks and those people, and I'm like, where are they getting this from? Where is any of this coming from? It's literally all made up, you know. I just don't understand. I don't get it.
Yeah, and a lot of it's trying to understand like where Lucifer comes from and all those things because the Morning Star is mentioned and all of that. But again, it's just like extended literature. It's not dogmatic, where it's not rather use the wrong word there. But it's not included in the original texts.
It's like literally one line and people base their whole life of it. Like I said, read Moby Dick. If you read like the original Moby Dick, it's an amazing book. You can get a lot out of it, especially when what's his face is floating on Queequeg's coffin.
I was watching. There's like a B comedy movie. It's called Postal, featuring Dave Foley. You know who Dave Foley is, but other than that, it's all.
Yeah.
And I was watching this movie, and the whole opening to the movie is these terrorists in the 9/11 hijacking. They're arguing over how many virgins they're supposed to receive once they get martyred, and they can't decide. So they end up calling Osama, and he gets pissed off. They call Osama bin Laden. He's like, "Well, now you get 3," and he's like, "What?" He's just totally arbitrary about it because you asked, now you get 3.
That's another thing. As growing up Catholic, that'll show you how arbitrary religion is in general. I'll never forget, like, when you reach a certain age, they tell you like what you're supposed to believe, and I'm like, this is Catholicism. It's just as exclusionary as Christianity. They just don't brag about it as much. But they believe everyone who isn't Catholic is going to hell.
Well, I think Islam is. I mean, they want to include like more voting age males, right? Like they're pretty pro getting, like 20 something year old dudes. Like they've always been about that. Like, they're not, so they're exclusive in a way, but they're inclusive to a certain, demographic that has historically been advantageous to them.
Oh, big time. Big
Yeah.
time. And Islam's a funny religion too, because if you say the words Sarah, Islam, or I forgot the saying, at that moment you're considered a Muslim. Like somebody could literally take a clip of me saying that and be like, "Oh God, I'm so converted." Like they're dying for members. If you just say the magic sentence, you're a member.
I was so worried
Oh.
about that recently because I told the story about going to this meeting, and I was like, well, I'm probably going to go back again, even though they're a bunch of Jesus freaks. And so I think, now people are like, oh, shit, is he going to be another one of those? And it's like, no, that's not what's going on. I mean, I'm going to go hang out with the Jesus freaks, but like that's, it's not a conversion story where I'm getting, um, but I have been like working on being more tolerant and trying to work on different angles for conversation. And it's also like being mentally tough, like being able to withstand just being around a lot of people who are very enthusiastic about their gospels and not be argumentative and try and find different ways to question and like not be offensive. Like that, I consider it a challenge.
I 100% agree with you. The first time someone called me out on my patches, I told them to go stuff themselves. I was like, you and your religion can go stuff yourself. The second time I came back with like, it's funny. I never watched Dillahunty, but I've seen almost every video Aaron Raw's ever put out. not recently. I haven't watched him in like a year, but I went through that phase, So I came with my art apologetics ready to go, my atheist apologetics. So it is tough when someone challenges you and you're just like, I don't agree with you. And it's different when you say, I don't agree with you and here's why. Then like, I don't agree with you, go F yourself. Because the first time the guy called me out, I was like, because in LA, you just don't talk to people like that. And I'm sure where you live, people just don't yell at each other like that.
Not usually.
But I could wear anything else. I could wear all red. No one would say a word to me. I wear any anti-religions, anything, and somebody's ready to fight.
Christians are the first to the battlefield. Yeah.
I wear a lot of moon and star, and I have one with a cross through it, and not one Muslim has ever said a word to me. And I live in an area with a large Muslim population. No one's ever, not even like a crossword to me about it ever. So it's maybe they think I just hate turkey.
Yeah, or you're just a deist.
Yeah, exactly. True. I actually have a couple work shirts. I have one it's Mo. I have an upside down cross and a star, a sun and the moon and a star with a cross through it. No one said a word to me. Oh, it's one of those days, huh? It's been a while, so I felt like
a lot going on. Yeah.
I've completely taken myself out of the community in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying to kind of step back and, I still go to my regular channels, but I'm not like interacting in chats as much. I
watch Esther almost every day because she's on when I'm cooking and cleaning, doing my soccer mom thing. But I've kind of had to take a step back because I got so immersed in the atheist community that it made me dislike everybody. I had to I had to take a step back. And that's another thing. I'm going to ask you an honest question. Do you feel that, and in no way, shape, or form do I think that atheism is a religion at all in any way, shape, or form. But do you think that some people treat it as such or are religious with their atheism? Or am I too judgmental?
I mean, I would say that I think some people are they seem to be more triggered by the fact that we're still talking to apologists. But I feel that that's like it's contradictory. Like the whole point of atheists being on YouTube is not there's like a double edge. Like we want to connect with each other, but at the same time we still want to connect with apologists and to make contact with the arguments. And if we stop doing that, then we're just creating our own echo chamber. And I think some people are criticizing the fact that we still entertain certain apologists on our channels, and it makes it hard for some of us to operate and feel comfortable.
I agree. You see, that's my thing. I don't judge what anyone does. Instead of even talking trash about the person, I'll just stop participating. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel that it's not my place to judge at all, you know. But if I don't like something, I'm just going to stop watching it because I don't know. I'll have to say, in the community, I created my own echo chamber, so I had to take a step back because, in a way, it was becoming not necessarily religious, but just yeah, in a way, because you have to I don't know. I'm gonna stop talking before I start naming names.
No, I think you hit it. I mean, everybody's guilty of it to some extent. Like we're criticizing Dillahunty, and he's been at this longer than any of us. But
Exactly.
again, we're not leveling. I think we're leveling valid criticism, which is like, and he's at the point where he can see that himself, so he doesn't need us or anybody else to really tell him. But
Exactly. And
like a lot of content creators aren't that self-aware. It's like they're not as self-conscious. Like some of us coming into this, we already have like a history of like understanding the psychology behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like a lot of content creators, they get boosted into popularity and they're not very self-aware about what they're doing. They just go with what gets the hits.
And that's the thing. Like
over the long term, it becomes like self-destructive behavior. It's just like an addiction.
I've learned so much. Thank you. Thank you, Sandy. It is better for your mental health. Don't get me wrong. Like I've learned so much from the atheist community that I literally have a book of notes. Like I'm like, oh shit. Like I didn't know that. I write it down. Like, but it is bad for your mental health if you submerge yourself into it too much, because it goes from like learning about chemistry to screaming about somebody that I probably never meet in my life. When it becomes a cult of personalities, I have to back off because I start judging people because I've been down and out. I've slept in my car. I've been to jail, like I said earlier, and I picked myself up, but not everybody can do that, So when I see certain people, I'm like, oh, that person's probably just like mentally ill. But even me saying that, like, who am I to judge that? Because someone could see my sewing addiction and be like, godless sewing is seriously overcompensating for something. And I am. Come and get to know me and you'll figure it out.
Yeah, like I really wanted to be involved in debates when I first got out here, and the more that I pay attention to debates, the more I feel empathy for the people who lose those debates. And like the guy I was talking to at the church the other day, I see that look of fear in their eyes, and I think once you finally get behind this guy's ideology, you're really putting yourself in a position to be like morally culpable for what they do once stripped of those beliefs. Like now you have to inform them with a whole other set of beliefs, and it creates this whole moral implication. It's like, what am I really getting into here?
That's why
so I think there's like a certain number of people who are mentally prepared for that, and most people aren't, which is like what Matt's addressing here. Like most of the people you're talking to, like, and I've been that guy. Like one of my earliest videos was me getting just accosted by Godless Girl on Apostate Alliance on the Raging Atheist channel. And I made a response to that where I was just incredulous. Well, why is she calling me an idiot? But at the time I was completely infantile in my understanding of what was going on. Like, so I was the idiot. Like,
I'm guilty. I'm guilty of the same thing. I've said so much cringy stuff online. It's not even funny. That's why I went back and completely privatized a lot of the live streams because I'm like, holy cow, I don't even feel like that anymore about certain things, but you learn and you grow. You have enough, you're self-aware enough to know that there's people that don't have any insight at all and just keep going. That's why I changed my channel to just like, I know about sewing. I know too much, so I just go with what I know, instead of woofing about celebrities and things that I really never cared about in the first place. Especially really, really, really rich people. I don't feel sorry for rich people because they could just pay to get out of their mistakes.
Yeah, well, but that's the system we've arranged, right? I guess we've consented to it, or so they say. All right, go ahead.
Oh no, I the society speech, I could go off for hours, but let's hear what Slick Rick has to say. I'm digging the eye patch. I'm digging the eye patch.
I have to say, I think he has a medical condition, so we'll get.
But so does Slick Rick. So does Slick Rick. I'm not trashing him. It's just part of my culture to point out things. I'm digging it. I would rock one if I ever if I ever had something wrong with me, I would rock an eye patch.
Oh yeah, I did just because I had a piece of effluvia in my eye for a couple of days. It was a good look.
Oh, Sandy, I come with a disclaimer. I speak for myself. And when I say we, I'm talking about myself and my other personality. The royal we. I'm kidding.
The entire process of apologetics, which I would probably talk about in another video, is setting people up to fail. It is handing out arguments that a good chunk of people don't understand, rooted in claims and evidence that they don't have a grasp of and can't really demonstrate. And so what you get is these half-baked ideas or this story where I remember part of it, and that turns into this game of telephone to where you have people calling into the show to claim that scientists have conclusively demonstrated that the earth is 6,000 to 12,000 years old, which is absolute nonsense, but they're only getting their information from Christian broadcasting things. My shift in thinking on this particular shirt is really pretty straightforward. For every believer that's out there, I'm going to say every believer, even though I recognize there are exceptions, they generally think that the gods that they don't believe in.
Damn it. Is this okay? It's just like delayed on my end. Is there something you wanted to say something, Will?
I was agreeing about what he said about these just nebulous arguments that people bring. They're like, this guy wrote in this book and blah, blah, blah. And I always have the same argument. Like, it still doesn't prove what you're saying, Like, okay, some guy in the 16th century agreed with you. Some guy, I can't even pronounce his name, but it still doesn't prove what you're saying. I'm a show me kind of guy, so I agree with what he's saying.
So I was looking into like the Roman history more recently, and I found it funny because the sources they corroborate, right? Or they use to corroborate, like this Roman source corroborates our story. And then when you look into it, they're like, yeah, there were a bunch of crazy Jews who kept saying. So it's not really like corroborating the actual authenticity of the story. They're saying, yeah, a bunch of fucking religious zealots at the time were saying the same thing. Like, but it doesn't make the story true.
Very much so. Very much so. And I think also, like in Judaism, they speak more on the human condition. And in Christianity, it's more based on, but look at the proof, because I've been to Israel and I call it Jesus land because They invented the road to Damascus. They invented all of these places because they're in the Bible. You know, if they existed in the old times, we would never know. But now it's just a tourist attraction for rich Christians and Catholics.
Yeah, it's a money maker for sure. And I think a testament to how a lot of power is achieved in like these modern Western countries.
Oh yeah, and like in Israel, they guessed where these towns would be. So they're like, okay, we're just gonna call this town Bethlehem. You know, and literally sell t-shirts. It's just funny. Religion's just funny. I agree with you.
So when I wear a shirt that says God is just pretend, they are thinking the same thing for the other gods that's out there. They're the ones that are saying, I'm making an even stronger claim. I'm saying it's my considered opinion that for the gods that I've been presented with and the ones that I haven't, I suspect that they're most likely pretend. I can't demonstrate it conclusively, but it seems to be a good reason. And what's more, the believers agree with me for all of the gods except for the one that they're saying is real. And so they're making an even stronger claim. They're not saying God as a concept is pretend, which is probably what this shirt says, or that all gods are pretend. They're saying every god except for this one is pretend.
Have you heard about like any of the other modern atheists, or I mean our contemporaries here, converting to deism because they don't have a decent claim for atheism as they see it as a positive claim against God? Do you know anything about that?
I thought, did Sam Harris say that?
I think Sam Harris said something similar to that. Shoot, there's dogs barking. There's another atheist in the community who I can't name right.
Daniel Dennett as well. Is it Daniel? Is his
Yeah.
name Daniel?
Yeah, Dennett's one of those who's in the deist category. Yeah,
I believe also Pinkerton as well. You know, it's so sad. I have a couple of his books. I can't remember his name. Is it Alan Pinkerton?
Steven Pinker.
Yes. Steven Pinker. I'm trying to think because there are people who have jumped ship. You know, there's somebody in the community that I didn't get along with, shocker, who's converted. You know, and I don't hold it against people. I think it's more of a personal thing. You know, I think belief is a hope of self-exoneration, especially people that have done horrible things to others. And you know, imagine. I'm not talking about throwing a rock through your ex-wife's window. Like, you know, imagine someone who went to prison for murder. They do their time, they get out, they're a part of society. You know, I'm a firm believer. If you do your time, I'm going to leave you alone. But imagine how much it must eat that person when they sit at home at night, hoping that God's not real. Hoping, you know. Because if it is, if God is, they're going to hell, you know.
Well, I think that it depends on what system of belief you subscribe to, because a certain percentage of them believe that even if you like murder a child or something crazy like that, you can still be forgiven if you have sufficient faith, right, and ask for forgiveness.
Catholics also believe, no matter what, if you accept Jesus Christ at your death, you're exonerated of all your sins for your life.
Yeah, and I've heard people make the argument like, well, then you can just go through your life doing anything you want except Jesus at the end, and then fuck it, who cares? We could all just be hedonists.
I got kicked out of a meeting. I was probably like how old are you when you're in the 6th grade? Like 11? I got kicked out of a meeting for saying that. Like, hey, well, then I should just be an a-hole for my whole life and then it's accepted at the end, you know?
Which is what, incidentally, a lot of Christians end up doing. I don't know.
One of the things that turned me off to religion in general was that nobody was following it. I was surrounded by all these abusive, angry people. And I'm okay. So this is my example for religion is a bunch of abusive, angry people. I don't want to be anything like them, you know? And it sent me on the deist journey, but like most devout religious people I've found are just abusive. I have no other way to say it.
Well, I think being a deist now is more like akin to being agnostic. They don't mean directly the same thing, but
Yeah.
it's the same idea to most lay people. And there's like, well, so you can't disprove. So you're open to the idea of God. You just don't like the ones we have, which is a fair assessment. Hey, yeah, maybe something out there exists, but you definitely don't have the answer.
Yeah. It's one of those, it gets confusing, and what about I always have wondered about this. What about heaven? Okay, there are some people in my life that if I died and went somewhere and they were there, it would be hell. There are just some people I hope I never see again in my life, and they probably think the same thing about me.
If you saw him, they'd be perfect. You'd be like, that bastard, why does he get perfection?
It would cease to be perfection, though, if we cross paths, So it goes back to what Bob Marley said, like, when you go to heaven, are you just like high and prostrating and staring at God the whole time? That sounds awful. Catholics also have it. Yes, it's the last sacrament. I used to know all of it, but I've it's been 20 something years. When my father passed away, that was the first time I'd walked in a Catholic church in 20 something years. It was strange because I forgot about all the rituals and everything. I don't know. I just oh, go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
would think that that the only way to rehabilitate it, where they could, have some concern about this, is for them to try to claim that God on the shirt either applies to all gods, in which case I'm saying all gods are just pretend, and we can conclusively demonstrate this rather than inferring it from the fact that we would all agree that most of them are pretend. And how do we tell the difference between the ones who are pretend and the ones who aren't? So I'm going to.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I just thought that'd be a good point to resume a little bit. Yeah.
When he says pretend, what does he mean?
Yeah, so make believe. So we can admit that they're entirely products of our imagination, right? At what point do we say this is, a common reality or entirely products of our collective imagination, right? I've heard this a few times as well. It comes up on the channel because, like, they can reconcile, like, Christianity and Islam and Judaism, but they can't reconcile that with Hinduism and different pagan religions and stuff like that. So how do you decide which ones are real and which ones are entirely figments of our imagination?
Oh, okay. That is true. I knew actually, I know a grown adult who is still Wiccan, and she still goes in the woods. Well, she lives in Oregon, so it's just fun, but she still does all those Wiccan things. And I would consider her just as devout as someone who goes to church every Sunday.
I'm on. What test was that? I don't know. More information. I assume it's something having to do with the Catholic Church, though. They're usually the ones that are big on religious tests.
I was raised Catholic, so I'm always like, it's not that I have a bias towards Catholicism, but it's someone will say something stereotypical, and I'll just say that wasn't my experience. From my experience, Catholics were fun because they always started smoking and drinking early. So like,
I didn't get that far into it. Like, I would say my experience with Catholic school was it was really cool And there were some cute girls there. But the point where I turned away was when they were like, "Well, we do corporal punishment," and I was like, "Ain't nobody whipping my ass for nothing ever." Like, and once that came up, it was just a done deal.
Well, I went to a CCD program because I went to public school, and so it was kids from all different schools from all around the area. So it was just different influences, and it was always like Catholics were always the kids smoking cigarettes behind the buildings, like drinking booze at 14. Like we were like we were the bad kids. I don't. It was just so different back then. Kids, my ex-wife and I were talking about this recently. Kids do not smoke. When we were younger, everyone smoked. Everyone smoked. Nowadays, you don't see minors just walking down the street smoking cigarettes like you did in our day.
Well, I think I was in like the last generation of that because I got arrested several times for smoking cigarettes, right? But I learned to be crafty about it and stuff, and but I remember, and on several occasions they destroyed my property because you can't legally have this. But I said, you're still destroying my property. You're still violating my constitutional rights and your authority as an officer. And they did it anyway, and it was never brought up. But I just remember that being one of my earliest like remnants of knowing that my constitutional rights were being violated.
I figured out early that our sheriffs, they in the 90s, they didn't care. They did not care who you were, what you were. That's why I say, like in LA, the one thing I'll say about the cops is I've seen them beat up white people too. I had a good friend. We were kids, and he got mouthy. We were out past curfew, and it was a female sheriff, and she had our hands on a hot car, and he was like, "Hey, can I get my hands off the car?" And she punched him in the face. This was like 1991 or 2. We were kids. We were like, "What do we do?" Cops, they were different back then, man. They were. Oh, but we have laws. People go to jail because we all have cameras now.
So I guess I'll tell this story now. It seems like an appropriate time. So when I went to jail for my drunk in public, which I recently did all my community service and paid my fines and whatever I needed to do. So it's effectively dismissed from my record. But I was picked up a couple months ago, back in July, because I was passed out on the side of the highway, drunk on Steel Reserve, and flipped out on my arresting officer. I headbutted the plastic divider in the middle of the cop car and sprayed blood everywhere, and it was a big mess. So I recently met back up with this police officer. I was just sitting in my car. I was hanging out in the parking lot down the street, and he rolled up on me, spotlighted me. He came and asked for my ID, and I was like, "No, I don't have to give you my ID." And I started giving him the whole act. And then I looked at his name tag and said, "Hey, I know you. You don't remember me? You picked me up out there on the highway." And then I kind of, I apologized to him for being a dick. I was like, "Yeah, I was drunk. I was like, I'm sorry for making a mess in your car, blah, blah, blah." And he's like, "Oh, it's cool. I don't take any of that personally. What happens on the job stays on the job." He never got my ID. He called me and cleared me, and we ended up, fist bumping, and he left. So I thought that was fun. But I was like, hey, I got to be like the bigger man in this situation. Like, hey, dude, you didn't fucking faze me. Like, sorry about messing up your car.
I like
We're
that.
good. We're good. All right.
I like that. I like that attitude because he knew you were wasted.
Right.
Because I quit. I haven't had a drink in 11 years. And one of the reasons I quit drinking is because I became an a-hole. I was a monster when I drank. So I get it. Like, you're a different person when you drink. Oh, that
night I was. I mean, I don't think that's my normal character, but yeah, I mean, I definitely don't stand by my, behavior that night at all. It's just those tiny victories in life. You're like, hey, I actually get to like address this thing I did wrong. Like you don't always get that.
Would you say though that like reading a Cop the Riot Act has emboldened you? Because I'll tell you, like, I'm not scared to tell a cop to fuck off. But it's different in the state of California because we're protected. Because right now across the country, they're taking away our rights to even videotape the cops with our phones or anything, you know. But here,
Well, I'm just saying, if you're gonna do it right. Because the way I represented, like, it wasn't helpful to anybody. You know, it just made me look like an asshole. You know, regardless of whether I was right or wrong, it just made me look like a dick at the end of the day. So you got to represent right. And I think a lot, not all, but a lot of cops do respect that, at least around here.
I'll tell you, like where I live, my neighborhood has been gentrified. So I live around a bunch of cops, and I don't know, I weirdly had to establish dominance, and they leave me alone. Because I like, they'll move and I'll say, I'm from here. You know, I'll tell them, you know, I don't know. It's just different. I always end up meeting the a-hole racist cop, or I get that vibe. If I get that vibe from somebody, I'm gonna switch on you real quick, and I'm gonna make you respect me. And it's not like I'm gonna be mean or anything. I'm just gonna be really short with you, you know.
You know, just to point out, Maya is absolutely correct. You don't ever have to talk to the police. It is your right to never talk to the police. But if you're innocent, state your case clearly and plainly, and don't be combative, right? And then later, like, I mean, and it sounds like, you know, like cliche. I'm just like, don't ever fight with the cops, because at the end of the day, you're going to lose, and that sucks. But if you want to state your case in court, this is the only way we ever win, is with arguments. And so if the only way you're going to win in a lot of situations is just don't talk, sure. I get away with a lot of shit because I'm a white guy and I look kind of meek. I don't look intimidating. I can present, you know, very non-aggressively and all that good stuff. So people freak out when I am aggressive, right? But the golden rule, and this is the golden rule whenever you're dealing with the justice system, is don't talk to the cops. The cops are never on your side, ever. That's not their job, right? At least not at this point in history. Ideally, the cops are out there to serve and protect and all that good shit. But, you know, in reality, they're out there to serve the prosecution in any case. And that's important to remember when you're talking in legal terms. I'm sorry, I wanted to go off on that little tangent there. Will probably had to go to the bathroom. I have to go to the bathroom too. We're going to listen to Matt Dillahunty.
I'm going to put them all in the same bucket till such time as somebody can distinguish the God that they believe in from the one that the rest of us believe in. It would probably be less offensive to them if my t-shirt said gods are just pretend, which would possibly be the all gods. But if it said gods are just pretend, that would be less troublesome, particularly to Christians and fundamentalist Christians, as I was. And the reason for that is, and I would put my Christian hat back on, but when fundamentalist Christians hear the word God, it means exactly one thing in their head. It is the God, the one true God, Yahweh, the everlasting creator of the universe who sent his son, blah, 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 blah. That's what
Hi, my name is Sori Kim, and I am an illustrator. I'm honored to have shown
I always find it interesting, the different commercials that we all get, because I always get a sewing commercial because I watch never ending amounts of sewing content.
Mine, if I'm on, most of mine are like anti-theist shit, and now I'm like freezing up here. But like a lot of it will be like Bible college online, which I'm like, oh, and I felt like we were being targeted, like
We
they were
are.
targeting our community. And I've heard other people comment about this. I don't know if there's a way they can do that. Like, we want to target as many atheists as possible, or if we can do that to
Well,
them. You know what I mean? Like,
I don't know if causation is correlation or whatever the saying is, but whenever I watch atheist content, I'll get a religious ad. Or I watch a lot of Nation of Islam stuff, not because I like the stand up for yourself, be strong black man stuff, even though 90% of what they say is bullshit. So I get a lot of Muslim ads as well, of like, please help this mosque in Buffalo, New York. But if you think about it, you have to have a lot of money to put a real commercial on YouTube like that. So they're not that broke. But YouTube does target atheists.
true. But I mean, you can put it up for, I think it like depends on how many plays. So you can put it up like once every so often if you're targeting like one demographic. You'd be like, oh, once every 5 days. Well, then you're gonna hit so many of us if we're on here consistently. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, whereas if it's like a 30-day campaign or however they run those things. So I think there's different ways you can target that.
I see a lot of William Lane Craig and Frank Turek stuff too. But I used to get into fights with their proteges on YouTube. So I think that's why I still get those commercials. I'm out of
Or
that
anything
phase,
that
too.
you're searching, it's going to like cross-reference. So even if I'm looking at those debates, it's going to like add those into my algorithm, right?
I've told you that story a million times. I got into a fight with an apologist online, and I was at Walmart, and the mofo lives in my town. So I walked right up to him. I'm like, I'm godless sewing. And his face was like, uh-oh. Nice guy.
I'm always in fear of that. Like, if I'm going out to church with my mom, am I going to meet some apologist I met on the internet the other day? Luckily, I don't get into it with them, but they're still going to be like, oh, you're that ape guy. I'm like,
You know what? To his
yeah.
credit, he was a nice. We talked about hockey. He was a nice guy, but like, it's funny how someone will puff up on the internet because he went to that William Lane Craig school, and and so he comes with that apologist crap because they're prepared because they went to their little 6-month college course.
Yeah, well, Craig, what he's focused on free will, which is like you can't even. I mean, that's like an offshoot of the whole Christian thing. Like you can't even centrify on it really, biblically. You have to just create your own. Yeah, create your own story there.
He's smart though because he's connected with all those weird Christian schools. So I guarantee you, he gets massive kickbacks.
Yeah.
So he has these minions all over it's the weirdest thing. You fall into rabbit holes on the internet.
Yeah, if you seek, you will find.
So true. So true. I'm digging the eye patch.
That's what God in the singular means. It's like a name of the one true God almost. And when they see gods, plural, the knee-jerk reaction is to dismiss that as, oh, that's what the heathens or the pagans worship. That's what their beliefs are. And so if my shirt had said gods are just pretend, I think it would be less troublesome to believers. But it's technically more accurate to just stick with God in the colloquial sense and just acknowledge that all of these believers agree with me. There are a couple other reasons I'm happy to wear the shirt. I love 3/4 sleeve shirts, like the baseball type shirts, and this is one of them. It prompts conversations more than some of the other shirts that I wear, and I'm not always looking for conversation. I like to go out and be left alone sometimes, but every now and then I don't mind someone coming up and saying,
Andy brings up a
hey,
good point.
what's that about? What's that mean? Are you talking about my God? And then I get to be like, it depends. What God are you advocating for? Because wouldn't you think this is true about the gods that you don't believe in? How do we distinguish between your God and that you claim is real and the ones that I look at and say are pretend? By the way, which God is yours? Even within Christianity, there's thousands of different denominations, and one could say that the characteristics they had hundreds of thousands of different individual concepts of God, even within Christendom. I like to liken it to cryptozoology, who are more probably fanciful and have never been demonstrated to exist.
So Sandy brings up a really good point. Like our experience is from our stories is from our experience, and every single one of us has a different experience.
Yeah,
So
and our stories can only be reflective of our experience. We can kind of relate what we've heard, but we can't directly convey the sense of an experience if we haven't directly observed it, right? Like,
oh, absolutely. Like we're from the we're from the same state, but we have two completely different experiences. Like you're from the north, I'm from the south. Like we have we probably, like, if you asked us the same question, we'd have a different point of view, even though we're relatively from the same place,
and I mean, I understand where Matt's coming from as far as like, well, cultures back then were far more isolated than cultures are now. That's absolutely true. But like, you're still gonna have some commonality that share between them. I think that's where a lot of like when you have discrepancies in the Bible, you say, well, these guys just didn't speak the same language. And be like, well, yeah, but that's not like a trivial point. The fact that they did not necessarily speak the same language is not a trivial point. That's very important. It has a great deal to do with the way that these cultures interacted with each other and the history that plays out.
I agree. I've heard so many arguments. If this is his like goodbye speech, then I agree with everything that he's saying. If he's like, I am just done with these shrubs and their crappy arguments, I get it. Because that's what happened to me 4 years into it. I was like, man, I am so tired of like Darth Dawkins and Jill and all of these people, because it's just the same argument over and over and over again, and then spiking the football and telling someone how unintelligent they are. Like, get over it. Get over yourself. If I wanted to be yelled
what it
at,
appears to me is like Dillahunty is far more fascinated with discussing like arguments with, whatever. Is far more interested in the philosophy than talking to the believers at this point, which is why he's just like, well, fuck it. So I think he intends obviously to go on with the atheist debates and stuff like that. Like, he's just separating from the ACA network because he doesn't want to do these call-in shows. He doesn't want to have these dumpster fire debates with theists that are loaded. Like, it's going to happen as soon as somebody calls. Anybody who calls, they're going to get the same rebuttals because it's been done 1,000 times over or more.
there was this one debate, a random debate I was watching on Randolph's channel, and it was an okay debate, but towards the very end, and everybody was Caucasian, this guy brought up South Africa, and he's like, what about this and this and this? And I'm like screaming, like, this has nothing to do about Jesus. Why are you bringing up race? They become dumpster fires real quick. Because everybody else in the chat was like, why is he bringing up race? Why is this guy bringing up race? It was awful.
Like hella brown, No.
Oh man, people just like, if it's not relevant to the conversation, it doesn't need to be brought up. It's just one of those things. Like,
well, it's only relevant. It's only comical because of the antebellum South and the way they've twisted and conflated all these arguments to their own ends, right? Like, but we can identify this. Like, oh yeah, that sucked, but it doesn't say anything about the Bible. It's like, yes, it clearly does. If somebody can misconstrue your Bible so badly, you need to rewrite the fucking book, man. Like, this is your fault. You are responsible for this, like, in some way, shape, or form.
It's a good teaching tool though, because my son has autism, so I warned him, like, no, you have to stay away from cults. You have to stay away from people. I made him watch a documentary on David Koresh I'm like, no, you need to stay away from these people. It's important to inform your kids about religious zealots or just zealots in general.
Yeah, I mean, I think, teaching like critical independent thought is the core of that. Anytime you're
Mhm.
like, no, like you don't have to appeal to a group in any instance. Like your kids, the young people are automatically going to get that. That's, what I ascribe to be like any type of appeal to authority in a group setting is going to be counterproductive to you. Like
Absolutely.
as a person, you should not
Absolutely.
have to do that logically. It doesn't make sense.
That's just the big thing that I teach my kid, because it's not just autistic kids, but they fall into certain categories easily, like mass movements. That's why sometimes on Twitter I won't fight somebody, because I'm like, I don't know if this is a 15-year-old kid just sitting in the room angry.
Well, half the
Just call-
time it feels like you'd be more productive. You apply to that, hey, Sonny logic. Like I've got twice as much experience as you, but and then it's also like I'm not your dad. Let him fucking tell you about it. I
I
don't.
just try to like with my kid, because he's with me every day, and I'm a pirate. Like I am a real life pirate, so I just try to lead by example. And there's a lot of that of like the old school BS that I didn't teach my kid, like self-hatred, like all that old school stuff of being self-conscious and stuff like that. Like, no, you can. That's okay. We don't act like that here, but it's you're right. It's my duty to make sure that my kid doesn't join an extremist group. It used to be to keep your son or daughter off the pole, and now it's you're a bad parent if your kid joins an extremist group. I'm serious. I've had this conversation with people like, where's the new line? Because we all go to strip clubs now. Strippers are accepted. So where's the line,
Like mine
Go-go
can't buy
dancers.
them, but they can steal them from their grandparents. So
So as long I told my neighbors, I'm like, look, don't have I hope those guys with the blue shirts and the khaki pants,
yeah.
they look like they fucking work at IKEA. I'm sorry. I'm like, don't let me catch your son dressed like he's working for IKEA.
Fucking A. All right, let's try to get through the last 5 minutes of this. Yeah, see what he has to say.
There are plenty of these proposed creatures, not just straight fantasy things like fairies and elves, unicorns, the Loch Ness monster, Bigfoot, chupacabras, etc. I don't believe in any of them, including the ones that I haven't heard of. Now, somebody's like, how can you not believe in something you haven't heard of? And I'm like, how can you believe in something that you haven't heard of? Belief is the result of becoming convinced. And so if I haven't heard it, I clearly haven't been, made convinced that it's real. So when I say I don't believe in any of them, including the ones I haven't heard of, that's the default starting place. That belief is something that needs to be earned. It needs to be deserved. It needs to be warranted. And it's fine to say that all of those gods are pretend, even if we discover that one of them is real or based on something real. I wear the t-shirt now, and I point out on the rare occasions when I'm asked, because most people just ignore it or move on, that it's my opinion, and that it's one that they probably share for all of the gods that they don't believe in. And they've done no more work to disprove all of those gods than I have. They have done no more work to prove that their God is the exception to this intuitive rule of thumb. And as soon as they do, as soon as they are able to demonstrate that they have a God that is the exception to the rule, then I will add an asterisk and a footnote to this shirt that says, God is just pretend, except for this other person's God. That one is real. And until that happens, I'm just going to wear the t-shirt that I like and will acknowledge that it is a claim that I may not be able to prove, and that I'm not sitting here trying to necessarily convince everybody that God is just pretend. I'm just stating what I think. And the difference between me stating that I think that God is just pretend and someone else is claiming that God is real, is that mine doesn't come with any baggage. If you don't agree with me, okay. I'm not saying you're going to burn in hell for all eternity if you don't believe that God is just pretend. I'm not saying that my God is just pretend t-shirt is the one true statement that everybody must live by and that you must vote in accordance with and all these other things. That's absolutely ridiculous. And so now I'll wear it because I can have the conversations about burner proof. I can have the conversations about what this shirt means. I can have the conversations about how they haven't done any work to distinguish their God from the ones that I'm talking about, and they agree with me on every other God out there. So get yourself a shirt. God's just pretend. I don't even know if they're made. I'm not advertising them, but don't feel bad about presenting the sort of things that prompt people to think, even if they're not absolutely perfect for a logic 101 philosophy epistemology class, because we can also have fun and we're allowed to have opinions and it's not the end of the world. You're not doing great damage to the atheist community by proudly saying, yeah, I'm actually convinced that there aren't any gods, provided you're still a reasonable, skeptical individual who would say, if you have sufficient evidence to warrant me and everyone else believing in your God, I will in fact change my mind. And until
Why, hello. I think Chaos will jump it back in soon, hopefully. If not, I hope everyone's having a great evening. I lost my voice and I'm fighting Mike Pence's fly is in here. They should be right back. Hopefully. You know, the funny thing about StreamYards is I think this will stay open even if I jumped off. StreamYards is weird that way. But you never know.
We're back again. Okay. I think it's working now.
I have a quick copyright question. Would you get a copyright strike if I just started randomly singing NoFX songs?
No, I think even like if you use anything in public domain, you'll get a copyright claim. So their video is tagged like automatically, but it's not a strike. So a copyright claim is different from a copyright strike.
Okay, because I've received one on my channel, but that's because this particular person literally owned what I put on mine, and they were like, "No, strike," and they struck me down. So I got a real strike over a stupid Singer sewing machine commercial.
Oh yeah, that'll do it, especially if it's anything that's like independently owned now. So like I know any book that you have like that was published prior to the copyright law is available for free on the internet somewhere. Like that's how I get all these like old philosophy books and shit. They're all available for free because they were printed prior to the copyright laws. So we can get them in the U.S. And it's different in like the U.K. and different countries and stuff.
I just don't know anymore. Like one of the reasons I hopped on your stream is because I've been editing, but like I've been receiving like I'll make a video and they're like, you have to take this and this out, and I'm like, I'm getting tired of YouTube. They're stomping on my cliche tortured artist videos.
They haven't messed with me too much. Patreon's doing a bunch of new changes now. YouTube, I think, is pretty much like where it's at. I guess a bunch of the videos I released weren't like publicly available because I didn't hit the no, it's not made for kids button. And I guess if you make your channel age restricted, then it kind of resolves that issue automatically. But it's like if there's nothing like actually explicit in that material, then there's no reason for me to age restrict my stuff,
Yeah.
right? But it's not like actually offensive content. It's just stuff like this. But if you don't hit that button, YouTube kind of puts you under like a certain umbrella of questionable content.
Oh wow. See, I always hit no, not for kids.
Well, I realized
And I don't
when I
even
was
curse when I-
broadcasting live from StreamYard, you can create that broadcast and go through the whole process and put it out. And it wasn't until like days later I went back and went, oh, it didn't ask me for this. It didn't prompt me for this the first time. Like I had to go back and review the video to find that prompt.
It's so arbitrary. I play old music videos because I was one of those geeks that watched a ton of MTV as a kid, and they almost took my channel down over a Faith No More video. So, but I had no idea Faith No More was so protected. But if you watch any of my videos, I play Faith No More instrumentals almost in every one of my videos.
Well, on the other channel, what I was doing for a while was recommended albums. And if I'd take a clip of, 10 to 15 seconds from a particular song and credit the artist, then it would automatically tag that artist in the song, and then it was no longer a copyright infringement. But you have to credit the original speaker. Like anytime, if you're clipping a YouTube video, you're supposed to credit the original speaker. Which I usually do, like within the content itself. I'll just tell people who I'm listening to, but you don't have to do that. You can just @ them or hashtag them in the description, and it automatically resolves that issue.
It does it now, though. Even music that I play on my cell phone through my mic, it picks it up and says, "Oh, this is Barry White," or "This is blah 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 blah." You know, I have crickets. My house is infested with crickets. They're not good luck. I'm not religious.
I don't know, the dogs in this neighborhood are just going crazy right now. It's like every time I unmute. But I was like, I don't know how much they're showing up on my microphone or not.
You know, I liked that side of Matt Dillahunty because the only other Matt Dillahunty I've seen is ranting on Twitter and screaming at Christians. So I was always like, I want nothing to do with that guy. But everything that he said was logical. Like I have no argument in what he was saying at all. You know, I agree with a lot of it.
I've heard this before from a lot of that crowd, is that he was being pushed to do a lot of that because at the time it was popular, which I don't think is the case anymore. I think there's a lot more people who are getting tired of, and so now there's this new, like more nuanced conversation that they're pushing to the forefront, which I think was what we were always looking for in the first place. But it got the ACA, the Atheist Experience, a lot of hits for a few years, and so they pushed that brand. And I think Matt just unfairly kind of got to be the face of that brand, which makes me feel bad for him, you know. Like,
me too. Now I feel bad for all the trash I've talked. I blocked him on Twitter because he gets in arguments with, like, it becomes very like once a year everybody will argue about, like, are rocks atheists, and I literally put Twitter down for a month. Or, like, you know, there's always those dumb arguments, and I see people just getting in these awful fights over just to what I consider pointless arguments, because if a rock was an atheist, wouldn't affect me either way in my everyday life. You know, that's just the way I look at it. I don't know what that makes me, but
yeah, if rocks are atheists, then I want to smoke more of them. Oh,
I just don't get it, dude. I just don't, like, there are certain arguments where I'm like, really, bro? Like, come on, man. Like, we're above this. A long time ago, I saw somebody took a clip from Hollywood Boulevard, and they were like, a bunch of atheists beat up a Christian on somebody with a sign. And I won't say who the person was, but they're really prominent in the atheist community. They're like, we're above this. And I was like, I live in LA. We are not above this. Like Christian at Pride, Christians get beat up. The cop, like, there's a line where the cops are protecting the Christians because, you know, they line up to yell at people at the line of Pride. And, you know, in LA, like, most people that are LGBTQIA plus, they work out, man. You'll get your hat handed to you by some buff dude. You like seriously. The joke is if you see a buff dude in LA, they're probably gay.
Yeah, and like the tables are turned in those instances. Like anybody who tries to like, we laugh at the American Nazi party here because they hold their little parade, and we're like, yeah, have fun with that, buddy.
Yeah,
you know, because here it's not a big deal. We shut them down pretty easily. But it's not like that. Like in some areas of the country, that's why it made like national coverage. Is they're still protected in so many places, and it's not that. I mean, like I do agree that people should be free to some extent to entertain bad ideology. You know, but you know,
but if
like
your
where do we draw the
ideology,
line?
yeah, but see, I agree with you. I'm against policing people, but there isn't, like, if your ideology includes hurting massive amounts of people, you can't be around. Is that like a line that can we like agree on that? You know, if it ends up in excluding anyone, then you need to piss off. I don't know. We still live in one of the only countries in the world where you're allowed to fly a flag of a defeated country. Can you fly a Nazi flag in Germany?
Well, no, but it's specifically in Germany and for very particular reasons. And
What if I
which
didn't
is funny,
flee?
like because a lot of people who flee German oppression, they come here specifically for that reason because they can still be National Socialists. Well, at least some that I've met, like that's a legitimate argument, and we don't condemn National Socialism as an ideology, right? Like whereas in Germany, if you champion that ideology in any sense, doesn't matter whether you're a Nazi or not, but if you champion that ideology in any sense, you will be censored.
Let's
Which I
switch
think
sides.
does impinge upon the basic freedom of speech, right? Like you should be able to talk about it and not be censored.
Because
But
I'll tell you,
if you
like,
champion it, you're subject or open to the ridicule that follows it.
when I was younger, I fell in love with the Nation of Islam, and I tried to join, but then I found out it was just the same as Catholicism with more rules. But like they were real life black nationalists, which would be illegal in other countries. Like in England, Farrakhan isn't allowed to travel to England, and like this guy who is the version of that in the UK is not allowed to travel to America. I always found that really strange, but they're considered nationalists. Where do you draw the line though? Because they just tell you to wear clean clothes, brush your teeth, and stand up for yourself, and don't be scared of anyone, really. And to read. I would never discourage anyone to read anything, you know, read something.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say you can read anything. I think the Christians are the ones who cross that line. Like, really, we can see like where that distinction lies in the way evangelicals say, well, you can read this, but if you read this, you know, basically that you are acting in such a way that, like, it's kind of it's the word I'm looking for. It's suggesting in a way that you can partake in this behavior, but I'm telling you beforehand that if you do, you're going to be lost, right? So it's really damning that behavior before it's ever even engaged in. Like, and I think we do that in a lot of our culture. Like, so what
Have
you
you
were
ever
saying, well, anything that's like nationalistic should be suppressed. Well, I don't think that's necessarily the case. It should just be that we inform people before they read this. Hey, this is nationalist
because
rhetoric.
I'll tell
Like
you, like,
we have to like put it under that category. Like, be more specific.
the religion is complete butkiss, but I don't think there's anything wrong. Like, I just take it as like, hey, there are people who look like me who stand up for themselves, you know. And as an atheist, you know, like, there was one time this one guy, I was like, oh, I think this guy's awesome. I typed in hi in the chat just to see what would happen, and they're like, if you lived in my country, we would literally kill you. And I was like, oh, but I like you, and you would stone me because I'm an atheist, you know. And I was like, oh man, I should have never typed in hi, because now he knows who I am.
Yeah. That's ridiculous. I mean, I think of that all the time, even like with atheists here. Like, I thought about that, like putting in comments to the atheist experience and been like, okay, well, I regret making that comment, but if I delete it, I'll look even more dishonest. So maybe I can explain myself down the road, and then, like, this whole process takes place where like people are looking at this thing and they're not addressing it, right? And it's like, yeah, I'm that dude, right? I am that dude. Like, I fuck up all the time, but
Me too.
I'm
Me too. I'm willing, but I grew up having an outgoing parents. Okay, so I'm one of those people. I'm willing to have a decent conversation with anyone, as long as it doesn't turn into a shouting match. I'll talk to you about anything, even religion. Eventually, it's gonna reach a point where I'm like, well, what city do you live in? What sports team do you like? You know. But there are certain religions that do not back down. I just managed to get the Jehovah's Witnesses to stop coming by my house. I just managed. Well, I smoke a massive amounts of weed like at night, because I make sure everything, my son does homeschooling, so I make sure he gets all his classes and everything. I do the daddy daycare stuff. And then on the weekends when he's at his mom's house, like, I have security cameras. When I see the Jehovah's coming, I'll light a J up and open my garage. So I've just managed to drive them away. I've been in
I
this
have a
house.
Mormon friend who I've been talking to for like several years now. But
They're
like,
chill.
it's like, we know we touch base with each other, but there's certain topics we just don't broach. And so it's like that unspoken bond between us where, hey, if I don't call you out on your bullshit, you won't call me out on mine. And okay, but the conversation would probably be a lot more interesting if we did. I don't know.
It's funny you would say that. I have a love-hate, but a weird respect for Mormons, even though I know their religion is I hate brown people. But like, because I guess I grew up around Mormons, so you reach a point where, as long as you don't talk about certain things, they're just like anyone else. Because I have Muslim friends I grew up where they don't drink soda either. They don't drink coffee, or they don't drink certain stimulants. It's not just Mormons. And I'm one of those people that can deal with having less caffeine.
For sure. And it sounds like my mom just got back, so I need to, because of that, on her property, I probably got to cut this one off. You have anything coming up, bro? Or are you?
I'm editing a video right now. I used this stream as a distraction. It probably would have been out by now, but I got bored editing. So I'll have a video out this evening within the next couple hours. Godless sewing. I love you all.
Excellent. Love you too, man. With that, I'm going to end this stream, see what's going on outside, and be back soon doing Stupid Monkey Philosophy, doing the Patreon page where there'll be a $1 a month donation link for anybody who's interested. I'm doing philosophy and reviews over there. a lot of answers in Genesis and standing for truth stuff behind that paywall. I'm going to be bringing some of it out, like to preview it to y'all, and like see what everybody's like interested in hearing. I guess that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at.
Awesome. I want to say really quick, you should be proud of the progression that you've made in a year. I have an eidetic memory. I remember everything. And I go back at my videos and I'm like, oh man, it's been a big change from a year ago. And like there's been a lot of drama and stuff, but you're still here. So you should be proud of yourself for that. Because there's a lot of people who started out when you and I started out and they're not here. So, you know, I'm proud of you for still being here.
Hey, thanks. I mean, like, same to you. I mean, we've had our own share of adversity, but I think like that's the way we're just gonna overcome it. Like, we keep talking to each other. We don't hold on to this bullshit. I think people who hold grudges, they may have like some traction from their drama, but I think it's going to be short lived, and our conversations are going to end up outliving that. So I like,
also,
have some openness.
I have a bunch of bad examples because I'm surrounded by a bunch of angry old biker type, and they're like having strokes at like 60 and not living to be 70. So it's not worth you carry that in your body, and it will manifest itself one day, especially hate and anger.
Indeed. With that, I'll put the outro in. Thank you to everybody who joins, past, present, and future. Thank you, Will, for coming by. Don't hang on to the anger. Let it go. Stay trusty and stay true to yourself, and try not to be a stupid monkey. We'll say that. We're all getting a little smarter as we go. Good night and good luck, and goodbye.